Welcome, friend, to a quiet space created just for you. Tonight, we will embark on a gentle journey together, guided by the timeless wisdom of Buddhist tales. These are more than just stories. They are ancient keys, forged by masters to unlock the mind from its daily prisons of worry and stress, and to guide you into a state of deep, healing peace. As you begin to settle in, feel free to share in the comments where in the world you are listening from and what time it is for you. It's a beautiful way for us to feel our quiet, global community, all resting together under the same moon. There is nothing you need to do now, nothing to achieve. You're invited to simply receive. The Buddha once said, "Peace comes from within. Do not seek it without." In the hours to come, you will not just hear these words, you will begin to feel their truth in your own being. As these gentle stories unfold, you may notice a subtle shift. The restless energy of the day may begin to quiet. The rhythm of your breathing may naturally slow and deepen. This is not something you have to force. It is the natural response of a mind that is finally being given the nourishment and the stillness it has been longing for. So allow your body to become heavy, to feel completely supported. Let's take one slow, conscious breath together now. Let us begin. Our first story is about a kind of strength that the world often overlooks, and the hidden purpose in what we might call our imperfections. This is the tale of the crooked pine tree. On a high mountain pass, a single, ancient pine tree grew. It was not like the other pines in the forest below, which were tall, straight, and perfect for timber. This tree was gnarled and twisted, its branches reaching out in every direction. Carpenters who passed by would look at it and shake their heads. "What a useless tree," they would say. "You cannot make a single straight plank from it." The crooked pine tree heard these words for centuries, and it felt a quiet sadness. It saw its straight brothers being taken to become pillars in great temples and beams in sturdy homes, and it felt it had no purpose. One night, a terrible storm raged on the mountain. The wind howled with a force that snapped the straight, rigid trunks of the useful trees in the forest below. The next morning, the mountainside was a scene of devastation, but the crooked pine tree was still standing. Its twisted, flexible branches had yielded to the wind, and its gnarled, low-slung form had allowed the gale to pass over it. As the sun rose, a group of weary travelers who had been caught in the storm made their way up the pass. They saw the great twisted tree, the only shelter for miles. They gathered beneath its sprawling branches, protected from the lingering wind, and they built a small, grateful fire at its base. "Thank goodness for this tree," one of them said. "Its very crookedness has saved us." In that moment, the old pine tree understood its true purpose. It was not meant to be a pillar in a temple. It was meant to be a refuge. Its uselessness had been its very salvation, and the source of its unique and compassionate strength. This story is a gentle reminder for all of us who judge ourselves for our own crookedness, the parts of us that don't fit in, that aren't straight and perfect. We live in a world that values a certain kind of usefulness, and we can feel like failures when we don't measure up. But the wisdom of the pine tree is that our perceived flaws, our unique and quirky natures, may be the very source of our greatest strength and our truest purpose. It is often in our brokenness that we find our compassion, and in our vulnerability that we find our resilience. This same simple, natural wisdom is often missed by those who are too full of clever ideas. This brings us to a story about a man who knew all the words but had forgotten how to listen. This is the tale of the scholar and the bird's song. A very learned scholar who had memorized the entire Lotus Sutra came to visit a Zen master. The scholar was filled with pride and wanted to display his deep understanding. He found the master sitting under a tree, his eyes closed, a faint smile on his face. "Master," the scholar began, "I have come to discuss the highest teachings of the sutra with you. For instance, the passage on the universal gateway of the Bodhisattva Avalokiteshvara." He began a long, brilliant, and complex discourse, quoting passages from memory and explaining their intricate philosophical meanings. The master did not move or speak. He just sat, breathing quietly. The scholar talked for nearly an hour, his voice filling the quiet garden. Finally he finished, a little out of breath, and waited for the master's praise. At that exact moment, A small warbler in the tree above them began to sing a beautiful, clear, and intricate song. The master's smile deepened. He slowly opened his eyes, looked at the scholar and said, "I enjoyed that very much." The scholar was confused. "You enjoyed my discourse on the sutra?" "No," the master said gently. "I enjoyed the warbler's discourse on the sutra. He has just given the entire teaching without a single word. And unlike yours, his was the first time it has ever been sung. Did you hear it?" In that moment, the scholar felt a flush of humility. He had been so full of his own knowledge, so busy talking, that he had not even heard the beautiful song of the bird. He had been explaining the teaching, while the bird had simply been living it. This story is a quiet reminder of the difference between conceptual knowledge and direct experience. We can fill our minds with beautiful ideas about peace, love, and wisdom. But these are just maps. The real territory is the living, breathing, and singing reality that is right here, right now. The Master's teaching is an invitation to put down our own cleverness for a moment and simply listen. To listen to the sounds around us, to the feeling of our own breath, to the quiet song of the present moment. It is in this simple, direct listening that the true sutra is revealed. This same distinction between the true gift and the mere appearance of it is at the heart of our next story. It is a tale of two offerings, and a master who could see into the heart. This is the nobleman's single flower. A wealthy nobleman came to the Buddha, wanting to make a great offering. He brought a magnificent, jewel-encrusted golden vase, a symbol of his immense wealth and devotion. As he was waiting to present his gift, he saw a poor young girl who had been standing in the crowd, clutching a single, simple lotus flower she had picked from a pond. She saw an opportunity, and with a heart full of pure devotion, she darted forward and placed her single muddy flower at the Buddha's feet, and then retreated back into the crowd. The nobleman scoffed at the small, common flower. Then it was his turn. He strode forward and presented his magnificent golden vase with a great and proud flourish. The Buddha accepted the vase with a polite nod, but then he turned his attention to the single, simple lotus flower. He picked it up, held it to his heart, and smiled a smile of profound and radiant appreciation. The nobleman was deeply offended. "Blessed one," he said, "I have given you a treasure worth a fortune. That girl gave you a common flower that is worth nothing. Why does her small gift receive your greatest honor?" The Buddha looked at him with great compassion. "The value of a gift," he said, "is not in the gift itself, but in the heart of the giver. You have given from your vast abundance, and your gift is tinged with the pride of your own generosity. This young girl has given from the very little that she has. Her gift is pure, selfless, and complete. Therefore, in the eyes of the Dharma, her single flower is a far greater treasure than all the gold in your kingdom." This story is a gentle teaching on the nature of our own intentions. In all that we do, in all that we give, whether it is our time, our energy, or our resources, it is the quality of our heart that gives the action its true worth. A small act of kindness, done with a full and selfless heart, can send out ripples of grace that a grand gesture done for recognition can never create. It invites us to look not at the size of our actions, but at the spirit with which we perform them. This spirit of selfless compassion, which sees the worth in all things, is often tested by that which we fear. This brings us to a story about a monk who found a teacher in the most dangerous of creatures. This is the tale of the monk and the poisonous snake. In a small forest hermitage lived a monk who practiced a deep and boundless compassion. One morning, he found a poisonous snake lying near his path, cold and nearly dead. The other monks who had gathered cried out, "Master, leave it! It is a creature of poison. If it revives, it will surely harm you." But the monk simply looked at the snake and said, "This being is suffering. The poison is its nature, but the suffering is its experience." He gently picked up the snake, its body limp and cold, and carried it back to his hut. He held it against his own body, sharing his warmth with it. He sat in meditation for the entire day, cradling the snake, and slowly the creature began to revive. As its life returned, it coiled around the monk's arm. The other monks watched from the doorway, terrified, but the snake did not strike. It simply rested there, feeling the steady, fearless warmth of the monk's heart. After a while, The monk carried the snake back to the forest and released it into the sun. His student asked him, "Master, were you not afraid? It could have killed you." The master replied, "Fear is a thought about what might happen. Compassion is a response to what is happening." The snake was suffering. In that moment, there was room only for compassion. When the heart is truly open, there is no space for fear to take root. This story is a profound lesson in the power of unconditional love, or metta. Our minds are constantly creating categories of safe and dangerous, good and bad. These labels create fear and separation. The master's mind was free from these labels. He was able to see past the idea of a poisonous snake and connect directly with the suffering being in front of him. His compassion was not a feeling, but a deep, unshakable state of being. It was so powerful that it calmed the very nature of the snake. The story is a deep inquiry for us. Where in our lives do we react with fear to the snakes we encounter, the difficult people, the frightening situations? What would it be like to meet them, not with the thought of fear, but with the simple, open-hearted response of compassion? This same compassion, which meets the world with an open hand, is born from a mind that has learned not to grasp. This brings us to a quiet tale of a king who learned that the most precious things in life cannot be commanded. This is the story of the emperor and the winter roses. The emperor of a great land was a man who believed his will was supreme. He had conquered armies and bent nations to his command. One cold winter day, he was walking in his vast imperial garden, which was barren and covered in a light dusting of snow. "I wish to see roses," he declared to his head gardener. "Make them bloom for me now." The gardener was terrified. "But your majesty," he stammered, "it is deep winter. The roses are sleeping. It is not their nature to bloom in the snow. We must wait for the spring." "Nonsense," the emperor roared. "I am the emperor. If I command the roses to bloom, they will obey me." He ordered his servants to build great fires around the rose bushes to warm them. He had them wrap the branches in silk. He commanded his court musicians to play music to the sleeping buds. He did everything in his power to force the roses to bloom, but the roses did not obey. The fires scorched their branches, and the few buds that were forced open were pale, sickly, and withered in the cold air. The emperor was left with a garden of dead and broken bushes. In his rage to force a premature beauty, he had destroyed the possibility of any beauty at all. The old Zen master who advised the court came to him. "Your Majesty," he said softly, "you can command an army, but you cannot command a rosebud to open. Some things in this life cannot be achieved by force. They can only be received when the time is right, with a patient and a quiet heart." This story is a simple but profound teaching on the wisdom of trusting natural timing and the futility of egoic control. We are often like the emperor. We want what we want, and we want it now. We try to force our careers to move faster, our relationships to deepen on our schedule, and our own personal growth to happen overnight. This constant striving, this forcing of the rosebuds of our lives, is a source of immense stress and often leads to burnout and disappointment. The Master's wisdom is an invitation to cultivate patience and trust. It is the understanding that there is a natural rhythm to life, a season for planting and a season for blooming. Our work is not to force the bloom, but to tend the garden of our life with care, to provide the right conditions, and then to have the wisdom and the faith to let things unfold in their own perfect time. This same wisdom, which comes from letting go of control, is at the heart of all true mastery. This brings us to a tale of an artist who found his greatest skill only when he stopped trying. This is the story of the calligrapher's final stroke. There was a master calligrapher who was known for his ability to draw the character for dragon with a single, fluid, powerful stroke of the brush. It was a stroke that seemed to contain the very spirit of the mythical beast. An ambitious young student came to him. "Master," he said, "I will do whatever it takes. Please, teach me your dragon stroke." For 10 years the student practiced. He copied the master's work thousands of times. His technique became flawless, but his dragons were just skillful copies. They had no life, no spirit. "I have failed," he finally told the master in despair. "I cannot do it." "You have practiced enough," the master said. "Tonight, Do not practice. Go to the high mountain and simply watch the storm that is coming. Do not think about dragons. Forget everything you have learned. The student went to the mountain. A great thunderstorm rolled in. He watched the lightning as it tore across the black sky, a single, brilliant, jagged stroke of pure, untamed energy. He did not think, he just watched, his mind empty and awestruck. He returned to the monastery the next morning, his mind still full of the storm's power. He picked up his brush, and without a single thought, a single intention, his hand moved. And in a single fluid motion, a dragon appeared on the paper, a creature of lightning and thunder, more alive than anything he had ever drawn. He had finally done it. He had achieved the stroke not by trying, but by forgetting, not by doing, but by being. This story reveals the Zen principle of mushin, or no mind. The student's years of practice were necessary to build the skill, but his own conscious effort, his desperate desire to get it right, was the final barrier. The master's instruction to forget everything was the key. He was teaching him to let go of the striving, analytical mind. The experience of the lightning storm was a direct transmission of energy that bypassed his intellect. The final perfect stroke came not from the student's ego, but from a deeper, more intuitive place, a place of no mind, where the artist and the art become one. This is a lesson for all of our endeavors. We must do the practice, but there comes a point where we must let go of our self-conscious effort and trust the process. This letting go of the self is also the secret to finding joy in our work, a lesson we learn from two brothers who had very different approaches to their craft. This is the tale of the two brothers and the clay. Two brothers were potters in the same village. The older brother, Ichiro, was ambitious. He worked day and night to become famous. He would look at the work of other potters and constantly compare his own. His mind was always on the final product, on the praise he would receive, on the price his pots would fetch at the market. His pots were technically perfect, but they felt rigid and lifeless. The younger brother, Jiro, had a different approach. He simply loved the clay. He loved the feel of it in his hands, the smell of the wet earth. He was not trying to become a famous potter. He was just enjoying the process of being a potter. He would often hum a quiet song as he worked at his wheel. He was not thinking about the final potter. He was completely absorbed in the dance of creation in each moment. His pots were not always perfectly symmetrical, but they had a warmth, a life, and a joyful spirit that made people feel happy just to hold them. One day, a great Zen master came to the village. The villagers all brought out their finest wares to show him. Ichiro presented his flawless, perfect vase. The master nodded politely. Then Jiro brought his simple, slightly lopsided teacup. The master picked it up, held it in his hands, and a broad, happy smile spread across his face. He drank from it and said, This one holds the taste of joy. This story is a simple parable about process versus outcome. We live in a world that is deeply focused on results, on goals, on achievements. We are often like Ichiro, our minds fixed on a future destination, and we treat the present moment as just a means to an end. This creates a constant state of striving and anxiety. Jiro embodies the Zen spirit of being fully present for the journey. His joy was not in the finished pot, but in the making of the pot. He had discovered that the true reward of any activity is the quality of attention we bring to it. The master's wisdom is to recognize that the energy of the creator is infused into the creation. Ichiro's pots were full of his own striving and anxiety. Jiro's cup was full of his joy and presence. The story invites us to look at our own work, our own lives. Are we so focused on the destination that we are missing the joy of the walk? This joy in the present is often obscured by our fear of the unknown. This brings us to a quiet story about a student who longed for certainty and a master who taught him the freedom of not knowing. This is the story of the master who lived in a question. A student named Hiroshi was deeply troubled by doubt. He came to his master with a long list of questions. Master, he pleaded, I need to know the truth. Is there reincarnation? What is the nature of karma? What happens after we die? My mind needs certainty to be at peace. The master listened, and then he said, I cannot answer your questions. Hiroshi was shocked. But you are the master. You are enlightened. You must know the answers. Knowing the answers, the master said gently, is a kind of prison. The mind that has a fixed answer can no longer learn. It can no longer see. It is a closed room. I do not live in a house of answers. I live in a great open field of a single question. What is that question? Hiroshi asked. The master smiled. My question is, what is this? He looked around the room, at the light, at the teacup, at Hiroshi's own earnest face. This moment, what is it? I do not know. And because I do not know, I am free to meet it with fresh eyes, with wonder, with a heart that is completely open. The peace you are looking for is not in the certainty of an answer. It is in the spaciousness of the question. This story is a deep teaching on what Zen calls don't know mind. We are conditioned to think of not knowing as a state of ignorance, a problem to be solved. We crave certainty and feel anxious in the face of the unknown. But the master reveals that this don't know mind is actually a state of great wisdom and freedom. When we believe we have all the answers, our minds become rigid and closed. We see only what confirms our existing beliefs. But when we can rest in a state of humble not knowing, our minds become soft, open and curious. We are able to see the world not through the filter of our old ideas, but with the fresh, clear perception of a child. The master's single constant question, what is this, is a powerful mindfulness practice. It is an invitation to drop our stories and our labels, and to meet the raw, unedited, and mysterious reality of this very moment, just as it is. When we meet reality in this open way, we are less likely to fall into the trap of blame. This brings us to a simple tale of a clumsy novice, and a master who taught him about radical responsibility. This is the story of the spilled ink. A young, clumsy novice was carrying a newly filled inkstone to the abbot's study. As he walked, he stumbled, and the dark black ink splashed across the clean, white paper screen of the study door, creating a terrible stain. The novice was filled with panic and fear. The abbot came out and saw the mess. The novice immediately fell to his knees. "Master, forgive me," he cried. "It was not my fault. The floorboard was loose, and the cat ran in front of me, and the wind blew the door." He had a dozen reasons why the accident was not his responsibility. The abbot did not say a word of scolding. He simply went and got a cloth and a bucket of water. He knelt down beside the novice. "The ink has been spilled," he said calmly. "The only question now is, what is to be done?" And together they began to gently clean the screen. In the screen, in that simple, quiet action, the novice learned a lesson more profound than any lecture. He learned that blame is a waste of energy. It is a story the mind tells to protect the ego. Wisdom is to simply see what is, accept what has happened, and respond with whatever skillful action is needed in the present moment. This simple story is a powerful lesson in what is sometimes called 100% responsibility. This is not about blaming ourselves. It is the empowering recognition that our peace and effectiveness in any moment depend not on assigning fault for the past, but on taking responsibility for our response in the present. The novice was trapped in a story about what had already happened. This created fear and defensiveness. The abbot was free because his mind was not in the past, it was in the present, focused on the simple, practical reality of cleaning the ink. This teaching invites us to look at the spilled ink in our own lives, the mistakes, the accidents, the unfortunate events. How much of our energy do we waste on the story of blame, either blaming others or ourselves? What would it be like to let go of that story and to simply ask the abbot's question, "The ink has been spilled. What is to be done now?" This simple, direct wisdom is often the most profound, a truth we discover in our next story. It is a tale of a great teacher who learned his most important lesson from the smallest of beings. This is the story of the abbot and the child's question. The abbot of a great monastery was giving a very long and very complicated lecture on the profound Buddhist concept of shunyata, or emptiness. He was using complex philosophical terms and quoting from obscure ancient texts. The 100 monks in the hall were all listening with expressions of deep, furrowed concentration, most of them completely lost. In the back of the hall, a visiting mother was trying to keep her 5-year-old child quiet, but the child, bored with all the big words, suddenly slipped away from her and walked right up to the front of the hall. He stood before the great abbot, looked up at him with clear, innocent eyes, and asked in a loud, clear voice, "Can I have a cookie?" The hall was thrown into a state of shocked silence. The monks were horrified at the interruption. But the abbot stopped his lecture. He looked down at the child, and a great, warm, genuine smile spread across his face. He reached into the sleeve of his own robe and pulled out a small rice cake he had been saving. He handed it to the child. "Yes," he said, "of course you can." He then turned to his monks. "The Dharma talk is over," he announced. "This child has just given the entire teaching. True emptiness is not a complex philosophy. It is to be so empty of your own self-importance that you can respond to the simple, direct need of another being, right here, right now, with a simple and loving heart." That child's simple request for a cookie, which held a teaching more profound than any lecture, reminds us that the greatest wisdom is often found in the most direct and honest of hearts. This same directness can also be a powerful tool for cutting through our own self-deception, as our next story shows. This is the tale of the monk who whyed the Buddha. In a monastery there was a monk who had become deeply attached to a beautiful, small, golden statue of the Buddha. He would spend hours each day polishing it, making offerings to it, and praying before it. He believed his devotion to this statue was a sign of his deep spirituality. A traveling Zen master came to visit. He saw the monk's intense attachment to the statue. One day he found the monk in the main hall, carefully weighing the golden statue on a small scale. "What are you doing?" the master asked. "I am weighing the Buddha," the monk said with great reverence. To understand the weight of his great merit, the master looked at him, and his eyes held a challenging twinkle. "That is a fine statue," he said, "but tell me, how much does the real Buddha weigh?" The monk was speechless. He had been so focused on the object, the golden form, that he had mistaken it for the reality. His mind raced, trying to find a clever philosophical answer, but he knew there was none. The real Buddha, the boundless, formless nature of enlightenment itself, cannot be weighed. It has no substance. It is not an object. In that moment he saw his attachment for what it was, a spiritual materialism, a clinging to a beautiful form, which had become a barrier to the formless truth it was meant to represent. This story is a powerful pointer to the ways we turn our spiritual path into another form of attachment. We can become attached to our meditation practice, to our favorite teacher, to our spiritual identity, or even to a particular feeling of peace. We are, in a sense, always weighing the Buddha, trying to grasp and possess something that is fundamentally ungraspable. The master's question is a Zen sword that cuts through this illusion. It reminds us that the true path is not about collecting beautiful objects or experiences, but about realizing the formless, weightless, and boundless nature of our own awareness. This same formless awareness is the source of all true creativity, a lesson we learn from an artist who discovered his greatest work only when he had nothing left to lose. This is the story of the masterpiece of the broken jar. There was a master potter who created a vase of such exquisite beauty that the emperor himself declared it a national treasure. The vase was kept in the palace, and the potter's fame and wealth grew immense. But he was never able to create anything that beautiful again. He was haunted by his own masterpiece. Every time he sat at his wheel, he was trying to recreate that one perfect moment, and his new work was always stiff and lifeless. He had become a prisoner of his own success. Years later, a fire swept through the palace. The potter's masterpiece, the beautiful vase, was shattered into 1,000 pieces. When the potter heard the news, his students expected him to fall into despair. Instead, after a long silence, a slow, profound smile spread across his face. "I am free," he whispered. He returned to his simple, dusty workshop. He took a lump of ordinary clay. He was no longer the great master. He was no longer trying to recreate a masterpiece. He was just a man with his hands in the clay, with nothing to prove and nothing to lose. And that day, he began to create pottery with a freedom, a joy, and a humble living beauty that far surpassed anything he had ever made before. This story is a deep teaching on the nature of attachment and the ego. The potter's masterpiece, which seemed to be the source of his success, had actually become his prison. His identity was so tied to it that he could no longer create freely. The fire, which seemed like a disaster, was actually an act of liberation. It destroyed his past success, freeing him to be fully present in his creative process once more. This is a powerful lesson for all of us. We often cling to our past successes or our past failures, and we allow them to define who we are in the present. We are afraid to try new things for fear of not living up to our own or others' expectations. The story is a beautiful reminder that there is a profound freedom in letting go of our own story. When we can come to each moment with nothing to defend and nothing to prove, we can act with a spontaneity and a joyful freedom that is the very essence of a creative life. This same joyful freedom is often found not by seeking, but by simply stopping. This brings us to a quiet story about a student who ran all over the world, only to find the answer where he began. This is the tale of the student and his shadow. A student was terrified of his own shadow. He hated the way it followed him. Dark and persistent, he decided he would run away from it. He began to run as fast as he could, but the faster he ran, the faster his shadow ran right behind him. He ran until his lungs burned and his heart was about to burst, but he could never escape it. He saw another man, a Zen master, walking slowly and peacefully along the same road. "Help me," the student cried, panting and exhausted. "I am trying to escape my shadow, but it will not leave me alone." The master looked at the frantic student, and then at the brilliant sun directly overhead. He smiled a gentle smile. "You are trying too hard," he said. "You cannot escape your shadow by running. You will only exhaust yourself. Watch." The master simply walked over to a large shady tree and stood under its branches. His own shadow instantly disappeared, blending into the greater shade of the tree. "The way to lose your shadow," the master said, "is not to run from the light, but to simply find a place of rest." This simple Titus story is a profound metaphor for our struggle with the shadow parts of ourselves, our fears, our insecurities, our painful memories. We are often like the student, believing that if we just run fast enough, if we just stay busy enough, distracted enough, successful enough, we can outrun these difficult parts of our own psyche. But this is an exhausting and futile race. The shadow is a part of us. It is cast by our very presence in the world. The Master's wisdom is radical in its simplicity. The solution is not to run, but to rest. The shady tree is a symbol for the quiet, still, and accepting space of our own awareness. When we stop running from our difficult feelings and instead turn toward them, allowing them to simply be there within a larger context of mindful, compassionate presence, they lose their terrifying power. We discover that the shadow is only scary when we are running from it. When we can rest with it, we find our own wholeness. This same quiet presence is the key to all skillful action, as our next story demonstrates. It is a tale of a cook who saw the world not with his eyes, but with his spirit. This is the story of the task of a butcher. A prince had a butcher who had used the same cleaver for 20 years, and its blade was still as sharp as if it were new. The prince was amazed. "How is this possible?" he asked. "My own knives are dull in a month," the butcher replied. "Your Highness, what I care about is the task, which is beyond mere skill. When I began, all I saw was the ox. After a few years, I no longer saw the ox, but only the lines of its structure. But now, I do not see with my eyes at all. My spirit moves freely. I do not attack the animal. I sense the natural spaces, the gaps in the joints, and I allow my blade to pass through them. I never touch a bone or a sinew. My blade finds the emptiness. A good butcher changes his blade every year because he cuts. A mediocre butcher changes his blade every month because he hacks. I have not had to sharpen this blade in 20 years because I do not fight. I follow the way." This famous tasked story, which is at the heart of Zen, is a teaching on the nature of mastery and the state of flow. The butcher's method is a metaphor for how we can navigate the complexities of our own lives. We often approach our problems like the mediocre butcher, hacking away with brute force and a rigid mind. This creates resistance and exhausts our energy. The master butcher, on the other hand, embodies the wisdom of Wu Wei, or effortless action. He is not imposing his will. He is harmonizing with the natural structure of reality. He is finding the path of least resistance. This requires a deep letting go of the analytical, striving mind and a trusting of a deeper, more intuitive intelligence. It is about feeling our way through a situation rather than thinking our way through it. As you rest here, can you feel this same wisdom in your own body? Your heart beats, your lungs breathe without any hacking or effort from you. There is a deep natural intelligence that is always at work. The practice is to learn to trust this flow in our actions and in our lives. This same trust in a deeper flow is what allows us to let go of our own limited plans. This brings us to a story about a man who believed he was painting a masterpiece, only to discover his true art was in what he erased. This is the tale of the painter and the rain. A great painter was commissioned by the emperor to paint a mural of a majestic mountain landscape. He worked for a year, his every brushstroke filled with skill and precision. The final painting was a masterpiece of technique. It had perfect mountains, perfect trees, and a perfect cloudless blue sky. He stood back, filled with pride, and declared it finished. That night, a gentle rain began to fall. The painter had left a window open in the great hall, and the rain blew in right onto the still wet mural. When he returned in the morning, he was horrified. The rain had made the sharp, perfect lines of his mountains bleed and soften. His perfect blue sky was now streaked with 100 subtle, unplanned rivulets of grey and white. His masterpiece was ruined. He was about to destroy the painting in a fit of rage when a Zen master, who was visiting the court, came and stood beside him. "Ah," the master said, softly, looking at the mural. "I see that last night the mountain found its own spirit. Yesterday this was a beautiful painting made by a man. Today it is a living landscape, finished by the sky. You have finally learned to cooperate." In that moment, the painter saw his work with new eyes. The accidental rain-streaked sky had a depth and a mystery that his own perfect blue had lacked. The softened lines of the mountains looked more real, as if they were shrouded in mist. The rain had not ruined his painting. It had completed it. It had added the one ingredient he could never provide, the touch of the unpredictable living Tao. This story is a beautiful teaching on the grace of letting go of our own perfectionism and our need for control. We are often like the painter, trying to create a perfect, flawless life with a cloudless blue sky. But life is full of rain, unexpected events, accidents, things that are beyond our control. Our first instinct is to see these as imperfections, as things that have ruined our plan. But the Master's wisdom is to see them as a form of grace. It is often these unplanned events that bring the greatest depth, beauty, and authenticity to our lives. The practice is to learn to cooperate with the rain, to see the beauty not just in our own plans, but in the mysterious and wonderful way that life unfolds, often in ways we could never have imagined. This same ability to find wisdom in the unexpected is at the heart of our next story. It is a tale of a monk who searched for the Dharma in books, but found it in a simple everyday accident. This is the lesson of the sound of the peach. A young monk was a dedicated scholar. He had spent years studying a famous Zen Tuan. Without thinking good or evil, show me your original face. He had meditated on it, debated it, and filled his mind with complex theories about it. But the living answer eluded him. His mind felt like a tangled knot. One day, he was working in the monastery's orchard. He climbed a ladder to pick peaches. As he reached for a particularly ripe piece of fruit, his foot slipped. The ladder fell, and he came crashing down to the ground. As he lay there, stunned and breathless, with the sweet, sticky juice of a smashed peach on his face, his mind, for a single, brilliant instant, went completely blank. There were no thoughts of good. I am a good monk, or evil. I am a clumsy monk. There was no theory, no koan, no seeker. There was just the bright blue sky, the feeling of the hard earth, and the sweet smell of the peach. And in that moment of pure, thought-free sensation, he saw it. He saw his original face. He began to laugh, a deep belly laugh of pure liberation. This story, like the one of the broken tile, is a classic tale of sudden awakening. It shows that insight often comes not when we are trying our hardest, but when our usual mental processes are unexpectedly short-circuited. The monk's fall was a pattern interrupt. It knocked him out of his obsessive analytical mind and dropped him directly into the raw sensory reality of the present moment. The original face is not a concept to be understood. It is our own pure, simple awareness, the awareness that is present before we add the labels of good and bad, me and mine. The story is a playful reminder that we can't think our way to this reality. The truth is much closer, much simpler, and much more direct than our complicated minds can ever imagine. It is as close as the feeling of the ground beneath us, and as sweet as the taste of a summer peach. This same sweetness of the present moment is a gift we often refuse, because we are too busy carrying the burdens of the past. This brings us to a quiet story of two friends, and a lesson in what it means to truly travel light. This is the tale of the heavy bag of stones. Two men, who had once been dear friends, had a bitter argument and parted ways. For 20 years they did not speak. One of the men, named Kenji, held on to his anger. Every day he would replay the argument in his mind. Every night he would dream of his friend's betrayal. His resentment was a heavy stone he carried with him everywhere. The other man, Haru, after a period of initial anger, decided to let it go. He forgave his friend in his heart and moved on with his life, always holding a quiet hope for reconciliation. After 20 years they met by chance in the marketplace of a distant city. Kenji was stooped and weary, his face etched with bitterness. Haru looked peaceful and light. Kenji began to immediately bring up their old argument, his voice full of the same old anger. "I have carried the weight of your betrayal for 20 years, he said. Haru looked at him with a deep sadness and compassion. "My friend," he said gently, "I see that you have, but I must tell you. I set my own bag of stones down by the side of the road 19 years ago. I am so sorry that you chose to carry mine for me all this time as well." This story is a simple and powerful illustration of the nature of forgiveness. We often think of forgiveness as a gift we give to the other person, but this story shows that it is, first and foremost, a gift we give to ourselves. Holding on to anger, resentment, and grievances is like carrying a heavy bag of stones. It is an exhausting burden that weighs us down and poisons our present moments. The other person may have long since forgotten the incident. They are walking freely, but we are the ones who choose to continue carrying the weight. The story is a gentle invitation to look into our own hearts. What old stones are we still carrying? What old grievances are we refusing to set down? Forgiveness is the simple, courageous act of deciding that we will no longer carry a burden that is only hurting ourselves. It is the choice to set the bag down and to walk on, free and light. This same freedom is found not in grand gestures, but in the simple quality of our own mind. This brings us to a tale about a king who learned that the greatest kingdom is not one of territory, but one of peace. This is the story of the king and the quiet mind. A great king conquered all the neighboring lands until his empire was vast and he was the most powerful man in the world. But he was not at peace. He was constantly worried about rebellions, assassins, and the loyalty of his own courtiers. His mind was a battlefield. He heard of a hermit who lived in a tiny hut and was said to be the most peaceful man in the world. The king went to him. "I am the master of the world," the king said, "but I have no peace. You have nothing, yet they say you are at peace. I will give you anything you want if you teach me your secret." The hermit smiled. "The secret is simple, Your Majesty," he said. "Every morning I make a single vow." "What is this vow?" the king asked eagerly. "I vow that for this one day," the hermit replied, "I will not try to conquer the world. I will only try to conquer the king." "The king?" the monarch asked, confused. "But I am the king." "Exactly," the hermit said. "The king is that restless, demanding and fearful part of your own mind that is always seeking to control things, the part that is never satisfied. Every day I practice letting go of that king. I do not fight with him. I simply notice him when he arises, and I choose not to obey his commands. I choose stillness instead. My kingdom is very small, but because I am its peaceful master, I am happier than you, who are the restless servant of a vast empire. This story is a direct teaching on the nature of our own mind. We all have a king inside us, the ego, the part of us that is always wanting, striving, fearing and controlling. We believe that if we can just satisfy this king, we will find peace. But the hermit's wisdom shows that this king is insatiable. The more we give it, the more it wants. True peace comes not from satisfying the king, but from gently and mindfully dethroning him. The practice is to recognize the voice of this inner tyrant, the voice of anxiety, of greed, of anger, and to see it for what it is, just a thought. We do not have to obey it. We can, as the hermit does, choose to be still instead. We discover that our true kingdom is not in the outer world, but in the quiet, spacious awareness that is our own true nature. This same awareness, which is our true home, is often found only when we are willing to step out of our comfortable roles. This brings us to a story about a teacher who gave his most profound lesson only after he stopped being a teacher. This is the story of the master who became a bridge. A Zen master had taught at his monastery for 50 years. His disciples revered him. His every word was recorded, his every gesture analyzed for its deep meaning. But in his old age he grew tired of being a master. One day he simply walked away from the monastery. He traveled to a remote part of the country where no one knew him. He came to a swift-flowing river that was difficult to cross, and there this great and revered master spent the last years of his life as a simple, anonymous ferryman, rowing people back and forth across the water. His old disciples, after searching for a long time, finally found him. They were horrified. "Master," they cried, "what are you doing? You are one of the greatest masters of this age. You should be in the monastery, teaching, giving sermons. You are wasting your great wisdom as a common boatman." The old master, his face weathered by the sun and wind, simply smiled. "For 50 years," he said, "I stood on the riverbank and gave lectures about the other shore. I drew maps of the water and explained the principles of buoyancy. But in these last few years, I have finally stopped talking about the river, and I have simply become the bridge. This is the only sermon I have left to give. This beautiful and poignant story is a teaching on the difference between talking about the path and being the path." The master realized that his role, his identity as a great teacher, had itself become a subtle barrier. The ultimate teaching is not in the words, but in the embodiment. He let go of his revered status to perform a simple, humble, and useful act of service. In doing so, he became a living expression of the very enlightenment he had talked about for so long. He was no longer a pointer to the other shore. He was the means of getting there. The story gently asks us to consider our own lives. Where are we just talking about being kind, or peaceful, or compassionate? And where can we, in some small, humble, and anonymous way, simply be the bridge? This simple act of being is the theme of our next story for this journey. It is a tale that brings us back to the very beginning, to the simple, profound, and often missed miracle of our own existence. This is the story of the question that ended all questions. A young monk, after years of intense and difficult practice, finally came to his master for his final koan, the final question that would, he hoped, lead him to enlightenment. "Master," he said, his heart full of a mixture of fear and hope, "I am ready. Please, give me the final question." The master looked at him, his eyes filled with a deep and loving kindness. "There is only one final question," he said, "and it is this." He paused, and then he asked, very simply, "Are you breathing?" The young monk was stunned. He had expected a profound, paradoxical, mind-bending riddle. This was a question a child could answer. "Yes, master," he said, confused. "Of course I am breathing." "Ah," the master said, a gentle smile spreading across his face. "Then the teaching is complete." In that moment, the young monk understood. He had been searching for enlightenment as if it were a complex answer to a complex problem, a distant peak to be climbed. But the master's simple, absurd question brought him crashing back into the stunningly simple, miraculous, and ever-present reality of his own aliveness in this very moment. The breath. It was not a concept. It was not a theory. It was the living, undeniable truth of his own existence, happening right now, without any effort, without any seeking. The answer to all his searching was not in a thought, but in the simple, felt reality that had been with him all along. The question did not need an answer. It needed only to be noticed. And in that simple noticing, all other questions dissolved. That simple noticing of the breath, the gentle anchor to the present moment, is a truth so profound it can dissolve a lifetime of searching. This same direct, uncomplicated wisdom is often found not in strength, but in our willingness to be soft. This brings us to a story about a master whose final lesson was found not in a sutra, but in his own body. This is the tale of the master's tongue. The great Zen master Loso was very old and knew he was dying. His disciple, a man who had studied with him for 50 years, came to his bedside. "Master," the disciple said, his voice thick with sorrow, "you are leaving us. Is there one final teaching, one last piece of wisdom you can give me to guide my life?" Loso, who was too weak to speak at length, simply opened his mouth and pointed inside. "Look in my mouth," he whispered. "What do you see?" The disciple looked. "I see your gums, master. You have no teeth left." "And what else do you see?" Loso prompted. "I see your tongue," the disciple replied. "Exactly," the master whispered, a faint smile on his lips. "The teeth were hard and strong, and they are all gone. The tongue is soft and yielding, and it remains." Do you understand? In that one simple, physical metaphor, the master gave his entire teaching. We live in a world that prizes hardness, strength, and rigidity. We believe that to be strong is to be unbending, like the teeth. But the wisdom of the Tao and of Zen is that true. Enduring strength is found in softness, in yielding, in flexibility. The teeth which are rigid and resist are broken and lost. The tongue which is soft and yields to everything endures for a lifetime. This story is a beautiful physical reminder of the wisdom of the bamboo over the oak. It is a teaching that invites us to look at our own lives. Where are we being hard, rigid, and unbending in our opinions, in our relationships, in our resistance to life? This hardness is a source of brittleness and suffering. The path to lasting peace and resilience is the path of softness. It is the courage to be flexible, to yield, to adapt. This same gentle yielding is also the key to understanding that we are part of a larger whole, a truth we discover in a story about a creature who learned that its greatest fear was a misunderstanding of its own nature. This is the tale of the river and the drop of water. A single small drop of water, born in a high mountain spring, began its long journey in a great river. The river flowed through beautiful forests and peaceful meadows, and the little drop was happy. But one day, the river began to approach a vast, hot, and unforgiving desert. The other drops of water around it began to murmur in fear. "We will die here," they said. "The desert will drink us, and we will turn to dust and disappear." The little drop was filled with a terrible anxiety. It saw its own end approaching. It did not want to disappear, but a wise old voice from deep within the river seemed to whisper to it, "Do not be afraid. We are not just drops. We are the river, and the river has a secret way to cross the desert." The little drop did not understand, but it chose to trust. As the river reached the edge of the hot sand, the little drop did not fight. It simply let go. It felt the warmth of the sun, and it felt itself becoming lighter and lighter until it rose up, invisible, into the vast blue sky. It had become part of a great billowing cloud, and the wind, a kind and steady friend, carried the cloud high above the scorching desert. On the other side, as the cloud passed over a range of cool mountains, the little drop felt itself growing heavy again, and it fell as a gentle rain, joining 1,000 other drops to form a new clear stream, and it realized it had not died at all. It had simply changed its form to continue its journey. This story is a beautiful parable for our own journey through life and our fear of death or of great transformative change. We are often like the little drop, identifying with our own small separate self. We fear that the deserts of our life, great loss, change, or our own mortality will be the end of us. The river's wisdom is the teaching of our deeper, interconnected nature. Our individual life is like the drop, but we are also a part of the great river of life itself. The story teaches the wisdom of trust and surrender. When we can let go of our rigid attachment to our current form, to our familiar sense of self, we allow for a greater mysterious intelligence to carry us through the challenges we cannot face alone. We discover that what we feared as an ending was actually a necessary transformation, a part of a much larger and more beautiful journey. This journey is one that is often guided not by our intellect, but by a simpler, more honest compass. This brings us to a quiet tale of a monk who found his path only when he admitted he was lost. This is the story of the monk who knew the way. Two monks were traveling through a dense and unfamiliar forest. One of them, the senior monk, was a man of great pride and learning. He had a map and a compass, and he was absolutely certain he knew the correct path. The other monk was a young, humble novice. After walking for many hours, it became clear they were lost. The sun was setting, and the forest was growing dark and menacing. The young novice grew anxious. "Brother," he said timidly, "I do not think this is the right way. I think we are lost." The senior monk was deeply offended. "Nonsense," he snapped. "I have studied the maps. I am the senior. I know the way. Just follow me and be silent." He pressed on, his pride blinding him to the reality that they were walking in circles. Finally, deep in the night, cold and exhausted, the senior monk collapsed. "You were right," he whispered, his voice full of a shame that was even colder than the night air. "I do not know the way. We are lost." In the moment of that honest admission, a strange thing happened. The young novice's fear vanished. "It is all right," he said, his voice now calm and clear. "Now that we know we are lost, we can finally stop. We can make a fire, we can rest, and in the morning, with a clear mind, we can look for the sun and find our way together." And in the simple act of admitting he was lost, the senior monk discovered a deeper kind of direction, the humility to accept what is, and the wisdom to know that true clarity only comes when we stop pretending we already have it. This story is a simple but profound teaching on the spiritual danger of pride and the redemptive power of humility. The senior monk's knowing was his greatest obstacle. His ego was so invested in being right that it prevented him from seeing the truth. It is a common trap on any path of learning. We become attached to our knowledge, to our identity as someone who knows, and this can make us rigid and blind. The great turning point in the story is the simple, powerful act of saying, "I don't know." This is not an admission of failure. It is an act of profound courage and honesty. It is the moment we stop pretending and we become open to reality as it is. It is only when we admit we are lost that we can ever truly be found. This same willingness to see the truth, even when it is uncomfortable, is the key to all inner work. This brings us to a tale about a man who tried to hide his flaws, only to discover that they were the very thing he needed to see. This is the story of the Room of 1,000 Demons. A young warrior, who was very proud of his bravery, heard of a magical room in a distant temple. It was said that if a person could spend a single night in this room, they would be granted a wish for anything they desired. But no one had ever succeeded, because the room was haunted by 1,000 demons. The warrior, certain of his courage, decided to try. He entered the room at dusk. It was a simple, empty room. He sat in the center and began to meditate. As soon as the sun set, the demons began to appear. They were terrifying, with twisted faces and sharp claws. They whispered all of his deepest fears and insecurities into his ear. The warrior, true to his training, fought them. He drew his sword and slashed at them, but his blade passed right through them. He shouted mantras to drive them away, but they only grew louder. He fought all night, with all his strength, but for every demon he drove away, 2 more would appear. By dawn he was exhausted and terrified, and he fled the room, a broken man. Years later, a quiet Zen monk heard of the room. He too decided to spend the night there. He sat in the center of the room. When the demons appeared, with all their terrifying forms and voices, the monk did not fight. He did not try to drive them away. He simply sat, and with a gentle and compassionate heart, he said to the first demon, "Welcome, you are here, I see you." He then bowed to it. The demon, which was a creature of fear and resistance, was bewildered by this acceptance. It flickered and grew smaller. Another demon, the demon of his own self-doubt, appeared. The monk simply said, "Ah, you are here too. Welcome, there is a place for you here." And he bowed. He did this with every single demon that appeared. He did not fight them. He did not believe them. He simply acknowledged their presence with a calm and welcoming heart. And by the morning, the room was empty. There were no demons left, only a profound and gentle silence. This powerful story is a metaphor for how we relate to the demons in our own minds. Our fear, our anger, our shame, our trauma, our instinct, like the warriors, is to fight them. We try to suppress them, to argue with them, to distract ourselves from them. But this battle only gives them more energy. The monk demonstrates the radical and healing practice of mindfulness and acceptance. The demons are our own thoughts and feelings. They cannot be defeated with a sword. The only way to dissolve them is to meet them with a non-judgmental and compassionate awareness. The simple act of saying, "Welcome, I see you," is transformative. It takes away the fuel of our resistance. When we can learn to sit with our own inner demons in this way, not as enemies to be fought, but as frightened parts of ourselves to be welcomed and held with kindness, they slowly and naturally lose their power to control us. This same gentle power is what allows us to see the world not as a series of separate events, but as a single flowing whole. This brings us to a quiet story of a master who taught his most important lesson by seeing what others could not. This is the tale of the master and the broken plate. The same gentle power is what allows us to see the world not as a series of separate events, but as master's pieces. The same gentle power is what appeared into in a Zen monastery. It was the tradition that the master would give a Dharma talk every evening. One evening, as the master was speaking, a young novice who was serving him tea stumbled and dropped a beautiful ceramic plate. It shattered on the stone floor with a loud crash. The young novice was mortified, expecting a harsh scolding. The master stopped his talk. He looked at the shattered pieces of the plate on the floor. Then he looked at his students, who were all staring at the disaster. He smiled a calm, gentle smile. "Ah," he said, his voice full of a quiet wonder. "The plate is finally showing us its true nature. For all those years, it was pretending to be a single, solid thing. Now it has finally relaxed and returned to being the many beautiful pieces that it always was." Is it not a wonderful teaching? This short, profound story is a direct teaching on the Buddhist concept of emptiness, or shunyata. We live in a world that appears to be made of solid, separate and independent things, a plate, a tree, a person. This is the conventional reality, but the Master's wisdom is to see through this appearance to a deeper truth. Nothing is a single, solid thing. Everything is a temporary collection of parts, a momentary coming together of causes and conditions. The plate was never a solid entity. It was a temporary arrangement of clay, heat, glaze, and the potter's effort. Its breaking was not an end to its existence. It was simply a change in its form. The Master's ability to see this not as a mistake, but as a wonderful teaching, is the mark of an enlightened mind. He is not attached to the form of the plate. He is at peace with the natural, constant flow of arising and dissolving that is the nature of all reality. This story is a gentle invitation to look at the broken plates in our own lives, the plans that fall apart, the relationships that end, the things that do not last. Can we, just for a moment, see them not as tragedies, but as a revelation of the true, fluid and impermanent nature of life? This ability to see things as they are, without our own stories attached, is the key to freedom. As our next story shows, this freedom is often found not by going somewhere, but by simply arriving where we already are. This is the tale of the monk who was already there. A young, ambitious monk named Kaito went to his master. "Master," he said, "I wish to attain enlightenment. Tell me, how long will it take?" If I meditate for 4 hours a day, how long will it take? The master looked at him and replied, 10 years. Kaito was shocked. 10 years is too long. What if I meditate for 8 hours a day? What if I dedicate my entire being to the practice? Then how long will it take? The master replied, 20 years. 20 years, Kaito cried. That is even longer. What if I meditate for 20 hours a day, and I sleep only on a bed of rocks, and I eat only simple rice? What if I am the most dedicated student you have ever had? Then how long? The master replied, in that case it will take you 30 years. I don't understand, Kaito said in despair. Every time I promise to try harder, you tell me it will take longer. Why? Because, the master said gently, you have one eye on the path and one eye on the destination. With only one eye on the path, you will stumble, and the journey will be very long indeed. True enlightenment is not a destination to be reached in the future. It is the simple act of being completely here, with both eyes, for this one single step. This story is a famous Zen parable about the paradox of striving. We are a culture that believes that more effort equals better results. But on the spiritual path, this is not always true. The student's desperate desire for a future attainment was the very thing that was preventing him from being present. He was so focused on the goal that he was missing the entire journey. The master's seemingly cruel answers were actually a deep act of compassion. He was trying to show the student that the more you grasp for a future state of peace, the further you push it away. Peace is not something you get at the end of the road. Peace is the way you walk the road. The story is a gentle invitation to let go of our timelines and our expectations for our own growth. It is to trust that if we can simply learn to be fully present for the process of our lives, right now, the destination will take care of itself. This same simple presence is the key to finding beauty in the most ordinary of things. This brings us to a quiet tale of a tea master who taught his most important lesson with a simple, everyday object. This is the story of the master's perfect teacup.
It is Selsun Sentu presence is the key cup.
A great and wealthy lord came to study the way of tea with a famous Zen master. The lord was a collector of fine things, and he brought with him a priceless gift, a teacup of such perfect, flawless beauty that it was the envy of all other collectors. Master, the lord said, I have brought you this perfect cup so that we may drink a perfect tea. The master accepted the cup with a bow. He prepared the tea with his usual slow and graceful attention. Then he did something that horrified the lord. He did not pour the tea into the priceless, perfect cup. Instead, he took his own simple, cracked and well-worn teacup from the shelf, and he poured the tea into that. He then handed his own humble cup to the lord. Master, the lord exclaimed, deeply insulted, why do you not use the perfect cup I brought you? Why do you give me your own old broken one? The cup you brought me, the master said calmly, is a cup for the eyes. It is an idea of perfection. It is a thing to be admired, but it is not yet a cup for the hands and for the tea. This cup, he said, holding his own cracked cup, is my friend. It has shared 1,000 quiet moments with me. Its cracks are the memory of its life. Its warmth fits my hand perfectly. It does not distract from the tea with its own perfection. It simply serves the tea. Now please, drink. The tea is getting cold. The Lord took the humble cup, and as he drank, he understood that the true way of tea was not about perfect objects, but about a simple, humble, and wholehearted presence with what is. This story is a beautiful teaching on the difference between the idea of a thing and the living reality of it. We are often like the Lord, chasing after an idea of perfection. We want the perfect experience, the perfect relationship, the perfect moment. But this striving for an ideal can prevent us from appreciating the real, living, and perfectly imperfect beauty of what is right in front of us. The Master's love for his cracked cup is the love of a heart that has found its peace not in flawlessness, but in authenticity. It is a reminder that the most valuable things in our lives are often not the most impressive, but the most familiar, the most real, and the ones that have shared our journey with us, cracks and all. This ability to see the truth beyond the surface is the theme of our next story. It is a tale of a student who was given a single word and the journey he took to find its meaning. This is the lesson of the monk and the word mu. A young monk went to the great master Joshua. "Master," he asked, "does a dog have Buddha nature?" This was a famous philosophical question, as the teaching said that all beings possess this potential for enlightenment. Joshua's answer was immediate and sharp. "Mu," he said. Mu in Japanese can mean no or nothingness, but in Zen it is used as a word that is meant to cut through all conceptual thinking. The young monk did not understand. He thought it was a logical answer to a logical question. He went away and thought about it for months. Does mu mean that a dog is an exception to the rule? Does it mean the question is irrelevant? His mind spun in endless intellectual circles. He returned to Joshua. "Master, I have contemplated mu. I think it means that we cannot apply such human categories to the animal world." Joshua just replied, "Mu." The monk went away again. This time for years, he studied all the commentaries on the word mu. He debated it with other monks. He came up with dozens of brilliant, complex theories, and every time he returned to Joshua with his new understanding, the master would simply look at him and say, "Mu." Finally, after many years, the monk, now no longer young, came to Joshua one last time. He was exhausted and empty. He had no more theories, no more ideas. He simply bowed and said, "Master, I do not know." Joshua's face broke into a broad smile. "Ah," he said, "Mu," and in that moment the monk was enlightened. This famous Zen koan is a story about the complete and utter demolition of the analytical mind. The monk, like all of us, was trying to figure out the truth. He was treating mu as a piece of information, a concept to be understood. But mu is not an answer, it is a tool. It is a Zen sword that is designed to cut away every thought, every theory, and every concept, until nothing is left but the pure, direct, and unmediated reality of the present moment. The monk's enlightenment came not when he finally understood mu, but when he finally surrendered to not knowing. It is in that empty, open, and humble space, beyond all our clever ideas, that the truth can finally reveal itself. This same simple, direct truth is often the most difficult for us to see, as our next story shows. It is a tale of a man who travelled a great distance to find a teaching, only to learn that he had been carrying it with him all along. This is the story of the Pilgrim's Return. A man from a small, remote village decided he must find the greatest spiritual teaching in the world. He said goodbye to his family and his home, and he began a great pilgrimage. He travelled for 30 years. He crossed deserts and climbed mountains. He studied with famous gurus in crowded cities and sat with silent hermits in lonely caves. He learned many complex meditation techniques and gathered a vast collection of profound philosophies. Finally, as an old man, he returned to his home village. He had not found the one final teaching he was looking for, and he felt like a failure. As he walked down the familiar path to his old house, a light rain began to fall. He saw his daughter, now a grown woman, working in her garden. She saw him coming, and her face lit up with a joy so pure and so beautiful, it stopped his heart. She ran to him, and as she embraced him, she held her own cloak over his head to shield him from the rain. In that one simple, selfless, and loving gesture, the old man suddenly understood. He had travelled the entire world seeking a great teaching, and here it was. It was not in a distant land or a complex philosophy. It was right here, in the simple, unconditional love of his own daughter, in a gesture so ordinary and so natural he had overlooked it his entire life. He had been so busy seeking, he had forgotten how to receive. He stood in the rain, and for the first time in 30 years, he was truly home. This poignant story is a reminder to us all. We often imagine that the spiritual path is a journey to somewhere else. We are always seeking a future state, a more profound experience, a distant goal. But this story gently guides us back. The most profound truths are not hidden in exotic places. They are often found in the simple, humble, and overlooked realities of our own daily lives, in an act of kindness, in the love of our family, in the quiet presence of a friend. The pilgrim's great journey was not a waste. It was necessary for him to leave. so that he could finally have the eyes to see the treasure that had been waiting for him at home all along. This brings us to our next story for this journey, a tale that shows how our greatest gifts are often hidden in our deepest wounds. It is a lesson in how our imperfections can become our most beautiful and unique expression. This is the story of the scars of the old tree. In a forest there was an old gnarled tree that was covered in scars. It had been struck by lightning, its branches had been broken by the wind, and its trunk bore the marks of a forest fire from long ago. The young, smooth-barked trees around it would often whisper among themselves, "What an ugly, damaged old tree," they would say. "Its life has been so hard." One day a great artist came to the forest. He walked past all the perfect, straight and unblemished young trees, and he stopped before the old scarred tree. He set up his easel and he began to paint. He spent weeks there, capturing not just the shape of the tree, but its spirit. He painted the deep, dark scar from the lightning strike, and he saw in it a line of resilience. He painted the twisted, broken branches, and he saw in them a story of survival. He painted the blackened bark from the fire, and he saw in it a symbol of rebirth. When his painting was finished, it was a masterpiece, and it was called the soul of the forest. The old tree had become the most celebrated and beloved tree of all. Its scars, which the other trees had seen as a sign of ugliness and failure, were the very things that had given it its profound character, its deep beauty, and its unique and powerful story. This final story is a gentle teaching on self-compassion. We all have scars. We have the scars of our past hurts, our failures, our disappointments. We are often like the young trees, looking at our own scars with shame, wishing we were smooth and unblemished. But the artist's eye, which is the eye of wisdom and compassion, sees these things differently. It knows that our scars are not our shame. They are our strength. They are the marks of a life that has been fully lived, of battles that have been fought, of storms that have been weathered. They are what give us our depth, our character, and our unique capacity for compassion for others who are also scarred. The story invites you to look upon your own scars, not with judgment, but with the gentle and appreciative eye of the artist, and to see in them the profound and unique beauty of your own resilient spirit. That beautiful scarred tree, a masterpiece not in spite of its wounds, but because of them, reminds us that true worth is often hidden from the judging eye. This same wisdom which sees past the surface can also teach us about the nature of our own mind, as we learn in a story about a monk who tried to capture a feeling that could not be held. This is the tale of the monk and the happy feeling. A young monk named Taka had a profound and blissful experience during his morning meditation, a feeling of deep peace and radiant joy, more wonderful than anything he had ever known, washed over him. This is it, he thought. This is enlightenment. For the rest of the day he tried desperately to hold on to that feeling. He walked carefully, trying not to disturb it. He avoided talking to his brother monks for fear their chatter would make it go away. He sat down to meditate again, not to be present, but to try and recreate the blissful state. But the more he grasped for it, the more it seemed to slip through his fingers, like a beautiful soap bubble that pops the moment you try to hold it. By evening, the feeling was completely gone, and in its place was a deep sense of frustration and loss. He went to his master in despair. "Master, I had it," he said. "I had the most wonderful feeling of peace, but I lost it. What did I do wrong?" The master smiled a knowing smile. "You did nothing wrong," he said. "The feeling came and the feeling went. It is the nature of all feelings. They are like guests who come to visit. A wise host does not try to force the guests to stay forever. He greets them warmly when they arrive. He enjoys their company while they are here, and he lets them go gracefully when it is time for them to leave. The problem was not that the feeling left. The problem was that you tried to turn a welcome guest into a prisoner. This story is a simple but profound teaching on the nature of impermanence and non-attachment, especially as it relates to our inner states. We are all like Taita. When a pleasant feeling arises, happiness, peace, excitement, our immediate instinct is to cling to it, to try and make it permanent. This very act of grasping is what creates suffering, because no feeling is permanent. By trying to hold on to the good feelings, we create anxiety and are inevitably disappointed when they fade. The Master's wisdom is to cultivate the attitude of a wise host. It is to learn to welcome all our inner guests, the pleasant and the unpleasant, with a gracious and open heart. We can enjoy the happy feelings without clinging to them, and we can allow the difficult feelings to be present without trying to push them away, knowing that they too are just temporary visitors who will eventually leave. In this gentle allowing, we find a deeper, more stable peace that is not dependent on what particular guests happen to be visiting at any given moment. This same wisdom of allowing, rather than forcing, is the secret to all true creativity and skill, a lesson we discover in a tale of an artist who learned his greatest lesson, not from his hands, but from his heart. This is the story of the sculptor's rock. There was a great sculptor who was renowned for his ability to carve magnificent horses from stone. A young apprentice came to him, eager to learn his secret. "Master," he said, "your horses seem so alive, as if they are about to leap from the rock. How do you do it?" The master led the apprentice to a huge uncarved block of granite in his courtyard. "My secret is simple," he said. "I do not try to carve a horse. The horse is already inside the stone. My only job is to listen to the stone, and to gently chip away everything that is not the horse." The apprentice was confused. "But how do you know what is not the horse?" "I don't know with my mind," the master replied. "I feel it. I sit with the stone for many days. I learn its lines, its grain, its hidden strengths and weaknesses. I am not its commander. I am its servant. I am simply helping the horse that is already there to be free." This story is a beautiful metaphor for any creative or spiritual endeavor. We often approach our work and our lives with the idea that we must impose our will, that we must create something from nothing. This creates a sense of struggle and effort. The sculptor's wisdom is one of deep listening and surrender. He trusts that the form is already latent within the raw material. His work is not one of aggressive creation, but of gentle revelation. This is a profound teaching for our own inner work. Our true nature, our Buddha nature, is like the horse already inside the stone. It is not something we have to build or create. The practice of meditation and mindfulness is the gentle process of chipping away everything that is not the horse, the layers of conditioning, the fearful thoughts, the limiting beliefs. We are not trying to become something we are not. We are simply revealing the peaceful, wise, and compassionate being that has been here all along. This same process of revelation is often obscured by our own cleverness, as our next story shows. It is a tale of a scholar who knew everything, but understood nothing. This is the story of the scholar and the empty hut. A scholar who had committed the entire Buddhist canon to memory came to a remote hermitage to debate with a Zen master. He found the master living in a tiny bare hut with nothing in it but a single sleeping mat. The scholar, filled with his own importance, began to lecture the master on the subtle philosophy of the Diamond Sutra. After an hour, the master, who had been listening silently, finally spoke. "You have read the words," he said, "but have you entered the house?" The scholar was taken aback. "What do you mean? We're in your house now." "No," the master said. "The sutra is like a beautiful house. The words are the gate. You have spent your life standing at the gate, admiring its design and describing it to everyone who passes by. But you have never actually stepped through the door and experienced the great empty, silent room that is inside." In that moment, the scholar felt the truth of the master's words. His mind was full of beautiful descriptions of the truth, but his heart was empty of the experience of it. He had been a collector of maps, but he had never taken the journey. This story is a timeless Zen warning against mistaking knowledge for wisdom. We can fill our minds with spiritual concepts and beautiful philosophies, but this is not the same as direct lived experience. The empty room is the state of pure non-conceptual awareness, the direct experience of reality that the sutras are only pointing toward. The master's lesson is a call to action. It is an invitation to stop being a spiritual tourist, standing at the gate, and to have the courage to step through the door. This means moving beyond our thoughts about peace and actually cultivating a direct experience of it through the simple, moment-to-moment practice of being present. This same presence is often found not in complexity, but in the simplest and most direct of our senses. This brings us to a quiet story of a monk who found enlightenment not in a profound thought, but in a simple fragrance. This is the tale of the smell of the blossom. A monk had been meditating for 20 years on the problem of duality, the separation between self and other mind and world. His mind was a brilliant, intricate web of philosophical concepts, but he felt no closer to a real breakthrough. One spring morning he was walking in the monastery garden, his mind wrestling with his koan. He was so lost in his thoughts, he did not notice where he was going. He walked right into a low-hanging branch of a plum tree that was in full, fragrant blossom. The branch brushed against his face, and for a single, stunning instant, his entire world was filled with the overwhelming, sweet scent of the plum blossoms. In that moment, everything disappeared. The koan, the monk, the garden, the 20 years of struggle, all of it vanished. There was only the scent. There was no I, smelling a blossom. There was only smelling. The separation he had been trying to solve with his intellect was dissolved in a single direct sensory experience. He stood there, dazed and reborn, and he realized that the answer had been here all along, not in his head, but hanging on a simple branch, waiting for him to finally stop thinking and just smell the flowers. This story is a beautiful illustration of how direct sensory experience can be a powerful gateway to awakening. Our thinking mind is the creator of duality. It is the mind that says, I am here and the world is out there. But our senses, when we are fully present with them, do not know this separation. When you are completely absorbed in a beautiful piece of music, where are you and where is the music? There is only the hearing. The monk's enlightenment was an accident, but it was an accident that was made possible by his years of practice which had ripened his mind. The story teaches us that insight is not always a product of effortful thinking. It can arise spontaneously when we can let go and simply allow ourselves to be fully absorbed in the sensory reality of the present moment. This same ability to be fully present is the key to all true service, as our next story shows. It is a tale of a doctor who learned his most important lesson not from a medical text, but from a simple monk. This is the story of the doctor's question. A famous doctor, known for his skill and his compassionate bedside manner, was growing old. He had healed thousands of people, but he felt a deep spiritual unrest. He went to a Zen master. Master, he said, I have spent my life relieving the suffering of others, but I myself am not at peace. What am I doing wrong? Tell me, the master said. When you are with a patient, where are you? I am with them completely, the doctor replied. I listen to their story. I examine them with care. I am famous for my attention to my patients. But when you are giving them medicine, the master asked, are you thinking about the next patient you have to see? When you are listening to their heart, are you already composing the prescription in your mind? When you look at them, do you see a person or do you see a disease? The doctor was silent. He saw the truth in the master's words. He was very good at doing the work of a doctor, but his mind was always one step ahead in the future, in the solution. He was not fully being with his patients. Go back to your clinic, the master said, and for one day try this. Forget that you are the doctor. Forget that you have to heal anyone. Your only task is to be completely present for the person in front of you. See if you can meet them, not as a problem to be solved, but as a fellow human being. That is all. The doctor did as he was told, and that day for the first time he felt a peace in his work that he had never known. He realized that the greatest healing he could offer was not his skill, but the simple, undivided gift of his own presence. This story is a profound teaching for all of us. No matter what our work is, we are often so focused on the goal, on the outcome, on being effective, that we miss the human reality of the present moment. The doctor's problem was his very desire to be a good doctor. This subtle ambition created a barrier between himself and his patients. The master's wisdom is to let go of the role and the goal and to simply be present. This is the heart of compassionate action. It is to meet another being, not with our agenda, but with our full, open and listening heart. In that shared presence, a healing can occur that is deeper than any medicine can provide. This same healing presence is what we must first offer to ourselves. as our next story reveals. It is a tale of a man who tried to run from his own heart, only to find it was the one place he could not escape. This is the story of the man who feared his own heart. A man was terrified of the sound of his own heartbeat. In the quiet of the night he would hear it, a steady, relentless thump, 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 and it would fill him with a dreadful anxiety. He saw it as the sound of his own mortality, the ticking clock of his own death. He tried everything to escape it. He filled his days with noise and his nights with distractions. He would play loud music, surround himself with people, and never allow a moment of silence. But in the small hours of the morning he would always hear it, waiting for him. He went to a Zen master. "Master, how can I escape this terrible sound?" he asked. The master said, "You cannot escape it, but you can learn to listen to it differently. Tonight, do not try to run from the sound. Lie down in the quiet, and when you hear your heart, do not hear it as the sound of your own small life ticking away. Hear it instead as the sound of the great drum of the universe, a rhythm that has been beating for billions of years, a rhythm that animates the oceans and the stars, and which is for a little while borrowing your own small chest to play its song. You are not a separate heart, beating in fear. You are the universe, listening to its own pulse." The man went home and did as the master instructed. He lay in the quiet, and he waited. When he heard the familiar thump-thump, he did not run. He listened, and as he listened with this new perspective, his fear began to dissolve. The sound was no longer threatening. It was profound. It was the sound of life itself, and it was not just his life. It was the great, mysterious, and eternal rhythm of being, and he was a part of it. And in that listening, he found a peace and a connection he had never imagined possible. This story is a beautiful teaching on the practice of reframing our own inner experience. We often have parts of our experience, anxious thoughts, physical pain, difficult emotions that we label as enemies. We try to escape them, which only gives them more power. The Master's wisdom is to not change the experience, but to change our relationship to the experience. He offered the man a new story, a new way of listening. This is a creative and compassionate act that we can all practice. When anxiety arises, can we see it not as a flaw, but as a surge of protective energy? When sadness comes, can we feel it not as a weakness, but as a sign of our deep capacity to love? By changing the story, we can change our entire world, not by escaping our own heart, but by learning to listen to its deepest and most universal song. This ability to find the universal in the personal is a mark of true wisdom, a lesson we learn from a teacher who found the sacred not in a temple, but in the most common of places. This brings us to a simple tale of the master and the marketplace. A young monk had spent 10 years in a remote mountain monastery, perfecting his meditation and studying the sutras. He had achieved a deep and profound state of calm. He came to his master and said, "I believe I am ready. My mind is quiet, and my heart is at peace. I have left the world behind." "You have done well," the master said, "Hind, but your training is not yet complete. For the final part, you must leave this monastery and go and live for 1 year as a merchant in the busiest stall of the city's central marketplace." The monk was horrified. The marketplace. It is a place of noise, of greed, of anger and confusion. It is the opposite of everything we practice here. It will destroy my peace. "The peace that can be destroyed by a marketplace," the master replied, "is not true peace. It is a fragile greenhouse peace. Go, the world will be your final teacher." The monk obeyed, and the year was the most difficult of his life. He was surrounded by shouting, by haggling, by dishonesty, by every form of human suffering and striving. His quiet monastery mind was thrown into chaos. But slowly he began to practice what he had learned in a new way. He learned to find the stillness underneath the noise. He learned to see the fear and the longing behind the greed of the customers. He learned to meet the anger of a frustrated shopper, not with his own anger, but with a quiet and compassionate heart. He learned to treat every transaction, every human interaction, as a form of meditation. At the end of the year, he returned to the monastery. He was no longer the serene, detached monk who had left. His face was lined with the cares of the world, but his eyes shone with a deep, warm, and unshakable compassion. "Now," the master said, when he saw him, "now your peace is strong. It is a peace that has been tested by the fire of the world. It is a peace that can be of use to others." This story teaches us that true spiritual practice is not about escaping from the world, but about learning to engage with it wisely and compassionately. The monastery is a training ground, a place to cultivate our inner resources. But the real test and the real purpose of our practice is in the marketplace of our daily lives, in our families, in our workplaces, in our communities. A peace that only exists when we are sitting on a cushion in a quiet room is a very fragile peace. The story challenges us to bring our practice off the cushion and into every aspect of our messy, complicated, and beautiful lives. This same practical, down-to-earth wisdom is at the heart of our next story. It is a tale of a monk who searched for the Buddha in all the wrong places. This is the story of the Buddha in the laundry. A young novice monk was obsessed with meeting the Buddha. He would spend all his free time in the main temple hall, sitting before the great golden statue, praying for a vision, a sign, some proof of the enlightened one's presence. He neglected his monastery duties, believing them to be unimportant compared to his spiritual quest. One day he heard that a great and famous Zen master was coming to visit their monastery, a man who was said to be a living Buddha. The novice was ecstatic. He waited all day at the main gate of the monastery, hoping to be the first to greet this enlightened being. He waited and waited, but the master did not arrive. Disappointed, he finally went to the monastery's laundry room to finish his neglected chores. The room was hot and steamy, and an old, stooped monk he had never seen before was there, washing the dirty robes of the other monks in a large wooden tub. The old monk was sweating and seemed exhausted. "Here, let me help you," the novice said, feeling a pang of compassion. For the next hour, they worked together in silence, washing and rinsing the heavy robes. When they were finished, the old monk turned to the novice and smiled. "Thank you," he said. "It is good to finally meet you. I am the living Buddhas you were waiting for at the gate." The novice stood in stunned silence, realizing he had been looking for a grand, impressive figure, while the true Buddha was right here, quietly and humbly, washing the dirty laundry of the world. This story is a simple but powerful reminder of where to find the sacred. We often look for it in the grand, the impressive, the spiritual. We look for it in special people, special places, and special experiences. But this story, like so many Zen tales, points us back to the humble, the ordinary, and the everyday. The true nature of enlightenment is not to be a special, separate being, but to be so completely free of ego that one is willing to do whatever simple, compassionate, and necessary task is right in front of them. The story gently asks us to reconsider where we are looking for our own peace, for our own truth. Perhaps it is not in the next workshop, the next book, or the next profound insight. Perhaps it is right here, in the simple, humble, and loving act of washing the dishes, of listening to a friend, of doing our own simple work with a good and quiet heart. This same quiet heart is what allows us to see the world not as a collection of problems, but as a series of lessons. This brings us to a quiet tale for this part of our journey. It is a story about a man who believed his flaws were his weakness, only to discover they were the source of his greatest gift. This is the story of the man who was afraid of the dark. There was a man who had a deep and terrible fear of the darkness. Every evening, as the sun would set, a great anxiety would rise in him. He would light every lamp in his house, and he would sit in a small circle of light, his heart pounding, terrified of the shadows that lurked in the corners. He went to a Zen master. "Master, I am a coward," he said. "I am afraid of the dark. Please, teach me how to be brave and how to get rid of my fear." The master said, "I cannot get rid of your fear, but I can teach you how to use it. Your fear is not a weakness. It is a sign that you are very sensitive to the absence of light. Most people do not even notice. Tonight, I do not want you to fight your fear. I want you to make it your guide. Take a single, unlit candle and walk out into the darkness. Let your fear be the reason you search so diligently for a tiny spark of light." The man was terrified, but he trusted the master. He went out into the dark, moonless night, his fear a cold knot in his stomach. He stumbled through the forest, his eyes searching desperately through the blackness. And then he saw it. Far in the distance, a tiny, warm pinprick of light from a hermit's distant hut. Because his own fear had made his eyes so sensitive, he saw this tiny light with a clarity he would have otherwise missed. He walked toward it, and as he got closer, he saw that the hermit was in trouble, his hut about to catch fire. The man was able to warn him, and together they put out the fire, saving the hermit's life. He returned to his master the next day, his face transformed. "I understand," he said. "My fear was not my enemy, it was my teacher. It gave me the eyes to see the light that others could not." This story is a beautiful teaching on how to work with our own darkness, our fears, our anxieties, our deepest vulnerabilities. We are often like the man, believing these things are flaws, weaknesses to be overcome. But the Master's wisdom is to see them as a source of unique sensitivity and strength. Our anxiety can make us more compassionate to the anxiety of others. Our own experience of sadness can give us the eyes to see the suffering in the world. The story invites us to stop fighting with our own darkness and instead to ask, what is this trying to teach me? What sensitivity is this giving me? When we can befriend our own fear in this way, we can transform it from a source of suffering into a source of profound wisdom and compassionate action. That compassionate action, born from befriending our own darkness, is a light we can offer the world. This same light is often found not in what we say, but in the simple quality of our presence, as our next story shows. It is a tale of a master who taught his greatest lesson without speaking a single word. This is the story of the master and the crying child. A young mother in a village was at her wit's end. Her small child had been crying inconsolably for 3 days and 3 nights. She had tried everything: food, rocking, lullabies, but nothing would soothe him. The entire village was disturbed by the constant sound of the child's wailing. In desperation, she took her child to the hut of a Zen master who lived on the edge of the village. "Master," she pleaded, "please use your spiritual power, perform a chant, say a prayer, do something to stop my child from crying." The master looked at the exhausted mother and the red-faced, screaming child with a deep and silent compassion. He did not say a word. He simply took the crying child from the mother's arms, and he sat down on the floor. He held the child gently and securely in his lap, and then he began to cry too. He did not pretend to cry. He just sat there, and with a full and open heart, he joined the child in its sorrow, his own tears streaming down his weathered cheeks. The child, who had been fighting against a world that was trying to fix him, was completely stunned. He stopped crying for a moment to look at this strange new person. Here was someone who was not trying to stop his tears, but was willing to share them. He felt for the first time completely seen and understood in his sorrow, and in that shared, compassionate space, the child's own sobs began to soften, and in a few moments he had cried himself into a deep and peaceful sleep in the master's arms. This story is a profound and moving teaching on the nature of true empathy and healing. We are often like the mother, believing that the way to help someone who is suffering is to try and fix their problem, to stop their pain. We offer advice, solutions, and platitudes. But the Master's wisdom shows that the greatest healing we can offer another person is not a solution, but our own deep, non-judgmental, and validating presence. To simply be with someone in their pain, without needing it to go away, is an act of profound love. The Master did not need to know why the child was crying. He simply joined him in the reality of his experience. This is a lesson for how we can be with our own difficult emotions as well. Instead of fighting our sadness or our fear, what if we could just sit with it and hold it with the same gentle, accepting compassion that the Master showed the child? This same gentle presence is the key to seeing the world as it is, not as we think it is. This brings us to a quiet story of a monk who learned that the greatest obstacles are the ones we build in our own minds. This is the tale of the invisible wall. A young novice monk was given the task of sweeping the long open-air corridor that connected the meditation hall to the dining hall. As he was sweeping one morning, he saw the monastery's abbot walking toward him from the far end. The abbot was a man of immense and intimidating presence, and the young novice was terrified of him. As the abbot got closer, the novice's mind began to race with fear. He is going to see that I am sweeping poorly. He is going to scold me. I am not a good monk. He became so consumed by his own fearful thoughts that he stopped sweeping and stood frozen, his eyes fixed on the ground. He felt as if a great invisible wall had suddenly appeared in front of him, a wall of his own fear and inadequacy. The abbot continued his slow, mindful walk. He reached the spot where the novice was standing, and without a word he simply turned and walked back the way he had come. He did not try to pass. He did not say a word. The novice stood there, his heart pounding, even more confused and ashamed. A few moments later, another senior monk who had witnessed the event came up to him. "Why did you not let the abbot pass?" he asked. "You were blocking his way." "I did not block his way," the novice protested. "He just turned around." "No," the senior monk said gently. "You built a wall in front of yourself with your own fear, and the abbot, in his great compassion, saw your wall, and he chose not to break it. He is waiting for you to see it and to take it down yourself." This story is a powerful metaphor for the invisible barriers we create in our own lives. The wall was not real. It was a projection of the novice's own mind. But it was so powerful that it dictated the reality of the situation. This is something we all do. We build walls of fear that stop us from taking a risk. We build walls of resentment that prevent us from connecting with someone. We build walls of self-doubt that keep us from sharing our gifts. The abbot's profound teaching was in his non-action. By respecting the novice's invisible wall, he made it visible. He held up a mirror to the young monk's own mind. The story is a gentle invitation to look at our own lives. Where are the invisible walls that are stopping us? Where are we blocking our own path with our fears and our limiting beliefs? The story reminds us that the power to take these walls down is, and always has been, entirely within ourselves. This same power is often found not in great effort, but in simple, direct action. This brings us to a famous story about a scholar who learned that the truth is not a concept to be understood, but a reality to be lived. This is the tale of the finger and the moon. A great Zen master was giving a Dharma talk. He was trying to explain the nature of enlightenment. He raised his finger and pointed toward the full moon, which was hanging in the night sky. "The teaching of the Buddha," he said, "is like this finger pointing to the moon. The finger is not the moon. It is just a pointer. You must look where it is pointing to see the moon for yourself." The disciples all nodded, looking at the master's finger with great reverence. One scholar in the group, however, began a long and brilliant analysis. "Ah," he said, "the finger represents the provisional teachings, the skillful means, while the moon represents the ultimate, inexpressible truth of shunyata." He went on, creating a complex and beautiful intellectual framework around the master's simple metaphor. The master listened patiently. When the scholar was finished, the master simply said, "You have described the finger perfectly, but you have still not seen the moon." This is one of the most famous and essential of all Zen teachings. It points to the universal human tendency to mistake the map for the territory, the description for the experience. We can become so fascinated with the fingers, the books, the rituals, the concepts, the philosophies, that we forget to look where they are pointing. The spiritual path can become a very intellectual hobby. We can collect beautiful ideas about peace, but never actually experience peace itself. The master's lesson is a blunt and loving recall to direct experience. The truth of the moon cannot be found in a discussion about the finger. It can only be found by looking at the moon. As you lie here tonight, all these stories, all these words are just fingers pointing. They are pointing to the quiet, peaceful, and luminous reality of your own awareness in this very moment. The practice is to gently move your attention from the words themselves to the quiet, simple reality to which they are pointing. This same simple reality is often obscured by our own dramatic stories about ourselves. This brings us to a quiet tale of a monk who believed his pain was his identity, and the simple question that set him free. This is the story of the monk and the heavy stone. A monk came to a Zen master his face a mask of deep and profound suffering. "Master," he said, "I am carrying a great and heavy stone. I have carried it for many years. It is the stone of my sadness and my past regrets. It is crushing me. Please tell me, how can I put it down?" The master looked at him with a deep and piercing gaze. He was silent for a long time. Then he asked a single simple question. "Tell me," he said, "who is it that is carrying it?" The monk was stunned into silence. He had always thought of the stone as something that was happening to him, a burden that he was forced to carry. But the master's question flipped his entire world upside down. Who is carrying it? In that moment he saw, with a flash of liberating insight, that he was the one who was picking up the stone every morning. He was the one who was choosing to identify with the story of his sadness. The stone had no power of its own. Its only weight was the weight of his own constant attention to it. He saw that there was an awareness that was separate from the stone, an awareness that had the choice to either pick it up or leave it be. And in that seeing, the stone simply dissolved. This story is a powerful teaching on the nature of identification. We often fuse with our difficult emotions and our painful stories. We say, "I am sad," or "I am an anxious person." We become the stone. But the master's question is a sharp Zen tool that helps to create a space of awareness between us and our experience. It asks us to look for the eye that is aware of the sadness, the eye that is aware of the anxiety. When we can rest in this witnessing awareness, we realize that we are not our feelings. We are the space in which the feelings are occurring. This realization is the beginning of true freedom. It doesn't mean the sadness will never visit again, but it means that when it does, we no longer have to pick it up and carry it as our identity. We can let it be, a passing cloud in the vast sky of our own peaceful mind. This same peaceful mind is the source of all true beauty, a lesson we learn from an artist who discovered that her greatest creation was not the one she planned. This is the tale of the weaver's most beautiful thread. There was a master weaver who was creating a great tapestry that was to be her life's masterpiece. She was using hundreds of shades of the most beautiful and expensive silk thread, but as she was working, she discovered that one of her spools of thread was flawed. It was a simple, grey, homespun thread, rough and uneven, that had been mixed in by mistake. She was annoyed, but she had no time to get another, so she decided to use it anyway, hiding it in the background of the design, where she hoped no one would notice. She worked for months, her fingers flying, creating a magnificent scene of a sunlit landscape. When she was finished, she hung the tapestry for all to see. People came and marveled at its beauty. "The sunlight on the mountains is so real," one person said. "The texture of the trees is so alive," said another. But everyone agreed on one thing. The most beautiful part, they all said, is that one simple grey thread that runs through the whole design. It is not as bright as the others, but it has a reality, a humility, that makes all the other brighter colours even more beautiful. It is the heart of the whole piece. The weaver looked, and she saw that they were right. The one flawed thread that she had tried to hide had become the very thing that gave her masterpiece its soul. This story is a beautiful parable for self-acceptance. We are all weaving the tapestry of our own lives, and we all have grey threads, the parts of ourselves that we consider to be flawed, ordinary, or not as good as our other brighter qualities. We try to hide these threads, to push them into the background, but the weaver's story teaches us that it is often these very qualities, our vulnerabilities, our struggles, our simple, humble humanity, that give our lives their depth, their texture, and their unique beauty. A life without any grey threads would be a flat and uninteresting thing. It is the interplay of the light and the shadow, the smooth and the rough, that creates a true masterpiece. The story is a gentle invitation to look at the threads of your own being and to honour them all, especially the simple grey ones that you may have tried to hide. This same honouring of the simple and the humble is the key to finding joy, a truth we discover in a story about a man who searched for a grand experience, but found it in a simple act. This is the story of the monk and the taste of water. A monk had been meditating for many years, seeking the legendary state of samadhi, a state of perfect blissful union with reality. He had read all the descriptions of it, how it was a state of ecstatic bliss, more wonderful than any worldly pleasure. One hot afternoon, After a long and fruitless meditation session, he was feeling deeply discouraged. He got up to get a drink of water. He went to the monastery's simple well, drew up a bucket of cool, clear water, and poured himself a cup. He was not trying to meditate. He was not trying to be spiritual. He was just a thirsty man getting a drink. But as he raised the cup to his lips, he was, for the first time that day, completely present. He was not thinking about samadhi, not thinking about his failures. He was just there. And as the cool, simple, and ordinary water touched his lips and soothed his dry throat, his mind was flooded with a joy so profound, so simple, and so complete. It was 100 times more blissful than any state he had ever read about. He stood by the well, and he began to laugh, a deep, joyful laugh of pure liberation. He had been seeking a rare and exotic nectar, and he had found it in a simple cup of water, as soon as he had stopped seeking. This story is a beautiful illustration of the Zen principle that enlightenment is found in the midst of our ordinary, everyday activities. The monk striving for a special state was the very thing that was preventing him from experiencing the profound bliss of the present moment. His breakthrough came when he gave up, when he let go of his spiritual ambition and simply became a thirsty man drinking water. This is a profound lesson for us all. We are often looking for happiness in the big moments, in the achievements, in the peak experiences, but the story reminds us that the deepest joy is often found in the simplest, most ordinary moments, when we can bring our full, non-striving presence to them. The taste of your morning coffee, the feeling of the warm sun on your skin, the sound of a loved one's voice, these are not small things. They are the whole of life. And when we can meet them with our full attention, we discover that the blissful state we have been searching for has been here all along, as close and as simple as a cup of cool water on a hot day. This same simple presence is the key to all true communication, as our next story reveals. It is a tale of a master who gave his most important teaching, not with his mouth, but with his ears. This is the story of the master who listened. A man who was in deep emotional pain came to a Zen master. He was full of anxiety and confusion, and his mind was a storm of conflicting thoughts. He had been to many other teachers who had all given him advice, told him what to do, and offered him complex philosophies, but he was still in turmoil. He came before the Zen master and began to pour out his story, his pain, his confusion. The master did not interrupt. He did not nod or offer words of encouragement. He did not offer any advice. He simply sat, completely still, and he listened. He listened with his whole being. He listened not just to the man's words, but to the silence between the words. He listened to the pain in the man's voice, to the fear in his heart. He offered the man the vast, silent, and non-judgmental space of his own peaceful presence. The man talked for over an hour. As he spoke, in the safe and accepting space of the master's silence, he began to hear himself for the first time. The tangled knots of his own thoughts began to loosen. His own solutions began to emerge from the depths of his own being. Finally, he fell silent. A profound sense of peace and clarity had settled over him. "Thank you, Master," he said, his eyes filled with tears of gratitude. "You have helped me more than anyone. Your wisdom is the greatest I have ever known." After he left, the master's young student asked him, "Master, you did not say a single word. How did you help him so much?" The master replied, "When a person is drowning, they do not need a lecture on the principles of swimming. They need you to hold out your hand and to provide a solid shore. I did not offer him my wisdom. I simply offered him my silence, and in that silence he was able to find his own." This story is a profound teaching on the art of what is called deep listening. In our culture, we often think that helping means giving advice, solving problems, or sharing our own experiences. But the Master shows that the most powerful form of help we can offer another person is the gift of our full, undivided, and non-judgmental attention. To listen in this way is a creative act. It creates a safe and sacred space where the other person can begin to hear themselves and to touch into their own inner wisdom. This is a practice we can all cultivate in our relationships. Can we listen to our loved ones without immediately trying to fix them? Can we offer them the solid shore of our own quiet presence and trust that they have the wisdom to find their own way? This same trust in our own innate wisdom is the key to our own freedom. as our next story shows. It is a tale of a monk who was a prisoner and the simple truth that unlocked his cell. This is the story of the monk and the prison door. A monk had been meditating for many years on the problem of his own monkey mind. He felt that his restless thoughts, his fears and his desires were a prison that kept him from a state of true peace. He would sit on his cushion and feel as if he were in a small, dark cell, and his thoughts were the iron bars. He used all his willpower to try and break out of this prison. He would fight his thoughts. He would try to suppress them, but the more he fought, the stronger the bars seemed to become. One day, in a state of deep despair, he went to his master. "Master, I am in a prison," he said. "I have been trying to break down the door for 20 years, but I am not strong enough. Please show me the way out." The master looked at him with a deep and compassionate gaze. "I see," he said. "Please show me this prison you are in. Take me to it." The monk led the master to his meditation cushion. "It is here," he said. "When I sit, the walls close in and the bars of my thoughts trap me." The master walked all around the cushion. He tapped the air where the walls were supposed to be. He peered through the bars of the monk's thoughts. He then turned to the monk with a look of gentle confusion. "I have looked very carefully," he said, "and I cannot find a single wall. I cannot find a single bar. And most importantly," he said, as he gently took the monk's hand, "I cannot find a door that is locked. The door you have been trying to break down has been wide open all along." In that moment, the monk understood. The prison was not real. It was a story he had been telling himself, a belief he had been holding on to so tightly that it had become his reality. His thoughts were not iron bars. They were just thoughts, as insubstantial as clouds. His 20-year struggle had been a fight against an imaginary enemy. He was already free. He just had not realized it. This story is a direct and liberating teaching. We are all in some way, like the monk. We believe we are trapped by our anxiety, by our past, by our circumstances. We spend our lives fighting to get out of a prison that does not actually exist. The door is our own belief in our own limitation. The Master's wisdom is to gently invite us to investigate our own experience directly. When you feel trapped by an emotion, can you look for the actual walls? Can you find the actual bars? Or is there just a feeling, a thought, a sensation arising in the vast open space of your own awareness? The story reminds us that the freedom we seek is not something we have to achieve or break our way into. It is our natural state. The door is not locked. We can in any moment simply choose to walk through it. That startling realization that the prison door was never locked is a freedom available in every moment. This same freedom is often found not by looking for what is holy, but by seeing the holiness in what is simply here. This brings us to a quiet story about a pilgrim who searched for a sacred mountain, only to find it in an ordinary act. This is the tale of the pilgrim and the old woman. A devout pilgrim had journeyed for many years to reach a legendary sacred mountain. It was said that the spirit of a great bodhisattva, a being of infinite compassion, lived on the mountain, and that anyone who met this spirit would receive a profound teaching. The pilgrim finally arrived at the foot of the mountain and began his ascent, his heart full of pious expectation. Halfway up the trail, he came across a poor old woman who was gathering firewood. She was struggling to tie a heavy bundle of sticks onto her stooped back. "Good woman," the pilgrim said, a little impatiently, "can you tell me the way to the Bodhisattva's shrine? I have come a long way to receive a teaching." The old woman looked at him, her face wrinkled and weary. "I know nothing of shrines," she said, her voice thin, "but my back aches, and this wood is very heavy. Could you, a strong pilgrim, help me carry this wood to my hut, just a little way off the path?" The pilgrim was annoyed. He was on a holy quest. He had no time to be carrying firewood for some old peasant, but a small flicker of compassion moved him. "Very well," he sighed, and he lifted the heavy bundle onto his own shoulders. The wood was heavier than he expected, and the path to her hut was steep and difficult. He struggled and sweated under the load. When they finally reached her tiny, dilapidated hut, he dropped the wood with a grunt of relief. "There," he said, "now I must get back to my quest." The old woman looked at him, and as she did, her form began to shimmer. Her wrinkled face transformed into a being of radiant light, and her simple robes became garments of pure silk. The pilgrim fell to his knees in awe. "It was the Bodhisattva. Your teaching," the Bodhisattva said. Its voice, like the sound of 1,000 soft bells, was in the carrying. "You were looking for a holy being on a mountain top, but compassion was waiting for you right here on the path, disguised as a bundle of heavy wood." This story is a beautiful lesson on the nature of the sacred. We are often like the pilgrim, believing that our spiritual life is something separate from our ordinary life. We seek out special experiences, holy places, and great teachers, hoping to find the sacred out there. But the Bodhisattva's teaching is that the sacred is not a destination. It is a way of walking. The opportunity to practice compassion, to relieve suffering, is the truest shrine we will ever find. The heavy wood of our lives, the difficult tasks, the inconvenient demands of others, the simple, unglamorous work of caring, is not a distraction from our spiritual path. It is the spiritual path. This same simple, direct path is often missed when we believe the journey is a long and complicated one. This brings us to a tale of a student who was given a single, simple instruction and the lifetime it took him to understand it. This is the story of the master's only instruction. A young, incredibly earnest student came to a Zen master. "Master," he said, "I will do anything you say. I will dedicate my entire life to your teaching. Please tell me, what is the one thing I must do to attain enlightenment?" The master looked at the young man's intense, striving face. "There is only one thing you must do," he replied. "Pay attention." The student was overjoyed. It seemed so simple. He bowed and went to his meditation cushion. He sat for hours, trying with all his might to pay attention. He focused on his breath, on his thoughts, on the sounds around him. Days turned into weeks, weeks into years. He became a master of concentration, but he was not at peace. His paying attention had become another form of tense, effortful striving. After 20 years, he came back to the master, now an old, weary man. "Master," he said, "I have done as you said. I have paid attention with all my strength for 20 years, but I am no closer to peace. I have failed." The master looked at him with a deep, compassionate smile. "You have done the first half of the instruction very well," he said. "Now you are ready for the second half." "The second half?" the student asked, bewildered. "You only gave me one instruction. The second half," the master said gently, "is this: pay attention softly. Pay attention with a gentle and a loving heart. You have been paying attention like a soldier on guard, watching for an enemy. Now learn to pay attention like a mother, watching her sleeping child. The attention is not the point. The loving quality of the attention is everything." This story is a subtle but crucial teaching on the nature of mindfulness. We often approach the practice as a form of mental discipline, a kind of forceful concentration. We are paying attention in a hard, focused, and judgmental way. This can create a subtle layer of tension and striving in our practice. The master's wisdom is to introduce the quality of gentleness, of loving kindness, or metta. True mindfulness is not a cold, clinical observation. It is a warm, spacious, and accepting embrace of our own experience. It is the practice of meeting every thought, every feeling, every sensation with the same gentle, loving presence that a mother has for her child. When we can bring this quality of softness and love to our attention, the practice is no longer a struggle. It becomes a refuge, a place of deep healing and peace. This same gentle peace is often found not in gaining more, but in needing less. This brings us to a quiet story of a monk who discovered that true wealth is not a matter of possessions, but of perspective. This is the tale of the monk who had nothing. A rich merchant who was a devout but worldly man went to visit a Zen monk who lived as a hermit in the mountains. The merchant was proud of his own generosity and his support of many temples. He found the monk in a tiny bare hut. The monk had only one robe, one bowl, and one sleeping mat. He had nothing else. The rich merchant was filled with pity. "Poor man," he said, "your life is so empty. You have nothing at all." The monk looked up at the merchant, his face serene and untroubled. He smiled a gentle, radiant smile. "No, my friend," he replied, "you are mistaken. I do not have nothing. It is just that there is nothing that I have." He then gestured to the vast mountain landscape outside his door. "I do not own this mountain, so I can enjoy its beauty without the burden of possessing it. I do not own the moon, so I can receive its light without the fear of losing it. I do not own the song of the birds, so I can delight in it without trying to cage it. My life is not empty. It is full of everything that I do not possess. Now, tell me, you who have so many things to worry about, which of us is truly poor?" This story is a profound teaching on the nature of non-attachment and true wealth. We live in a world that teaches us that happiness comes from acquiring and possessing. We believe that having things is the key to a full life. The monk's wisdom turns this idea completely on its head. He shows that the very act of possessing something creates a burden, the worry of maintaining it, the fear of losing it, the pride of owning it. By having nothing, he is free to enjoy everything. He is not a separate owner, looking at his possessions. He is a part of the seamless whole, delighting in the richness of the world, without the need to claim any part of it as mine. This is a deeply liberating perspective. It is an invitation to hold the things in our own lives more lightly, to enjoy them without being owned by them, and to discover the immense quiet wealth that is freely available in every moment when we simply let go of our need to possess it. This same freedom is often found not in our successes, but in our willingness to fail. This brings us to a story about a student who found his greatest strength only after his greatest pride was broken. This is the tale of the student and the unbreakable stick. A young student of martial arts was incredibly proud of his physical strength. His master was a small, old Zen monk who seemed as frail as a dry leaf. The student could not understand how this old man could be a great master. One day the master handed the student a long, thick bamboo stick. "This stick is your pride," the master said. "It feels very strong. Now break it." The student laughed. He took the stick, placed it over his knee, and with a great show of strength, he snapped it in two with a loud crack. "It is broken," he said, pleased with himself. "Yes," the master said. "Now you have 2 sticks. Break them." The student easily broke the 2 sticks, and now he held 4 shorter pieces. "Now you have 4 sticks," the master said. "Break them." This continued until the student was holding a bundle of dozens of small, thin splinters. "Now," the master said, "try to break them all at once." The student took the thick bundle of splinters in his hands and tried to break them, but he could not. The bundle, made of many small, flexible pieces, was far stronger than the single rigid stick had been. "I cannot," the student said, humbled. "Your pride," the master said, "is like that single rigid stick. It feels strong, but it is easily broken. But when your pride has been broken into many small, humble pieces, when you have known failure and have learned to be flexible, you become unbreakable." This story is a powerful teaching on the nature of ego and resilience. We often think of our pride, our certainty, and our rigid sense of self as a source of strength. But the master shows that this kind of strength is brittle. It shatters in the face of life's inevitable challenges. True lasting strength, resilience, is found in humility, flexibility, and the willingness to be broken. It is in our failures, in our moments of not knowing, that we develop a deeper, more adaptable kind of strength. The bundle of splinters represents a self that is no longer trying to be a single, solid, perfect thing. It is a self that has learned to be with all its many complex and sometimes contradictory pieces, and in that humble integration, it finds a power that can never be shattered. This same power is found not in avoiding our difficulties, but in using them as the very fuel for our journey. This brings us to a profound parable about a flower that found its beauty not in a manicured garden, but in the most difficult of places. This is the tale of the lotus and the mud. A young disciple came to the Buddha, his heart heavy with despair. "Lord," he said, "I am trying to practice your teachings, but my mind is so full of mud. It is full of anger, of greed, of jealousy, and of fearful thoughts. I am not worthy. I cannot grow in such impure soil." The Buddha did not offer words of comfort. Instead, he led the disciple to a nearby pond. The surface of the pond was covered in magnificent, pure white lotus flowers, their petals open to the sun, their fragrance filling the air. "Look," the Buddha said. "Do you see these beautiful flowers?" "Yes, Lord," the disciple replied. "They are perfect." "And where?" the Buddha asked. "Do you think their roots are?" The disciple looked down into the murky water. He could see that the long, strong stems of the beautiful flowers grew directly out of the thick, dark, smelly mud at the bottom of the pond. "They grow from the mud," he whispered, a look of dawning comprehension on his face. "Exactly so," the Buddha said. "It is only from the mud of our suffering, of our greed and our anger, that the pure white lotus of compassion and wisdom can grow. Do not despise your mud. It is the very soil from which your awakening will be born." This is one of the most central and compassionate teachings in all of Buddhism. We are often like the disciple, believing that our mud, our difficult emotions, our painful histories, our character flaws, is an obstacle to our spiritual growth. We try to get rid of it, to purify ourselves, to become someone who is not muddy. But the Buddha's wisdom is that this is a profound misunderstanding. The mud is not the obstacle, it is the nutrient. It is the very raw material of our transformation. It is through wrestling with our anger that we learn patience. It is through looking deeply into our greed that we discover contentment. It is through sitting with our sorrow that our hearts open with compassion. The story is a radical invitation to stop fighting with our own mud and to instead see it as the rich, fertile ground from which our own beautiful lotus can and will eventually bloom. This same transformation is often a process not of addition but of subtraction. This brings us to a quiet story of a man who searched for wisdom only to find it by losing what he thought he knew. This is the tale of the man who carried the books. A man dedicated his life to the search for wisdom. He read every philosophical and spiritual book he could find. He travelled the world, and in every city he would acquire more books. He built a great library, and his mind was a storehouse of vast and complex knowledge. He carried his favourite, most profound books with him, everywhere in a large heavy sack on his back. He believed that the weight of his books was the measure of his wisdom, but he was not happy. His mind was so full of the words and ideas of others that he could no longer hear the quiet voice of his own heart. He was so busy comparing theories that he could no longer see the simple truth of the world in front of him. One day, his journey took him to a wide, fast-flowing river that he had to cross. There was no bridge. He saw a simple ferryman with a small boat. The man loaded his heavy sack of books onto the boat, and they set out. In the middle of the river, the current grew strong, and a sudden wind tipped the boat. The heavy sack of books slid into the water and was instantly swept away. The man cried out in despair. "Everything is lost," he wailed. "My whole life's work, all my wisdom is gone." The ferryman, who was a simple Zen monk, looked at him calmly. "No," he said, "your wisdom is not lost. You have only just lost your burden. Now, for the first time, you are free to find your own." This story is a powerful parable about the danger of intellectual attachment. Knowledge can be a wonderful tool, but it can also become a heavy burden. We can become so identified with what we know, so weighed down by the concepts and theories we have accumulated, that we lose our ability to have a fresh, direct, and personal experience of life. The books are all the second-hand truths we have gathered. The monk's wisdom is to see that the loss of this burden is not a tragedy, but an opportunity. It is a moment of liberation. It is the chance to move from knowing about the path to actually walking the path. The story is a gentle invitation to look at the books we are all carrying. What beliefs, what old stories, what fixed ideas are weighing us down, and what would it feel like to simply let them be washed away and to trust the simple, direct wisdom of our own experience? This same direct experience is often the most powerful teacher, a lesson we learn from a master who gave his most profound teaching not through a lecture, but through a simple, shared meal. This is the story of the master's only rule. A new student came to a Zen monastery. He was very anxious and was determined to do everything perfectly. On his first day, he went to the head monk. "Please," he said, "tell me all the rules of this monastery so that I do not make any mistakes." The head monk replied, "There are hundreds of rules, but they all serve one, and the master will teach you that one himself at the evening meal." The student was filled with a mixture of excitement and fear. That evening, he sat in the great dining hall. The monks all sat in silent meditation before their simple bowls of rice and vegetables. The student was so nervous he could barely breathe. What was this one great, profound rule? Finally, the master, who sat at the head of the hall, picked up his chopsticks. He looked around at all the monks, and then he said, "Eat your rice," and he began to eat. The student was completely bewildered. Eat your rice. That was it. That was the one great rule. He watched the master. He saw that the master was not just eating, he was completely present for every single grain of rice. He was not thinking about tomorrow's chores or yesterday's sermon. He was not lost in thought at all. He was simply, completely and joyfully eating his rice. And the student understood the one great rule was to be fully present for whatever you are doing right now. If you are eating, just eat. If you are walking, just walk. If you are listening, just listen. The entire path was contained in that one simple, direct command. This story is the essence of everyday Zen practice. We often think the spiritual path must be complex and difficult, filled with hundreds of rules and techniques, but the Master's teaching cuts through all of this to the simple, profound heart of the matter. The only rule is to show up for your own life, to be present. We spend so much of our lives eating while thinking about work, working while thinking about vacation, and being with one person while thinking about another. We are almost never where we actually are. The Master's instruction to eat your rice is an invitation to come home to the present moment and to discover that in this simple, wholehearted engagement with our ordinary life, a deep and profound peace is to be found. This same peace is found not in avoiding our own nature, but in embracing it. This brings us to a quiet tale of a monk who learned that his greatest struggle was a misunderstanding of his own heart. This is the story of the monk and the wild geese. A monk named Shanti had a deep and abiding love for nature, but his teacher had told him that all attachment, even attachment to beautiful things, was a barrier to enlightenment. Shanti tried very hard to become detached. When he saw a beautiful sunset, he would try to feel nothing. When he heard the beautiful song of a bird, he would try to ignore it. He was at war with his own heart. One autumn evening, he was meditating by a lake. A long, graceful vive of wild geese flew overhead, their cries echoing in the twilight sky. Shanti's heart, despite all his efforts, soared with them. He felt a pang of such profound, joyful beauty that it brought tears to his eyes, and then he was immediately filled with shame. "I have failed," he thought. "I am still attached." Just then his master, who had been walking silently behind him, spoke. "Why are you so sad?" the master asked. "I am a terrible monk," Shanti confessed. "I heard the geese, and my heart was filled with a foolish attached joy." The master looked up at the sky, where the geese were now just a faint, distant line. "The geese do not ask you to be attached to them," he said. "They are just flying. Your heart does not ask you to be attached to its own joy. It is just feeling. The problem is not the geese, and it is not your heart. The problem is the thought you add afterwards, the one that says, 'This is an attachment, and it is wrong.' Why not just let the geese fly, and let the heart feel, and let the thoughts be thoughts? Why create a wall where there is only a beautiful evening?" This story is a deep and compassionate teaching on the nature of attachment. We often misunderstand this concept, and we turn our spiritual practice into a form of self-suppression. We try to become cold, unfeeling, and detached. But the Master's wisdom is that the problem is not our feelings. It is our clinging to our feelings and our judgment of our feelings. The joy that Shanti felt was not the problem. It was a beautiful, natural, and spontaneous response of an open heart. The suffering was created by his own mind, by the story that this feeling was wrong. The teaching is to allow our experiences to flow through us, like the geese flying across the sky. We can appreciate them fully as they pass, without needing to hold on to them, and without needing to condemn ourselves for having them. This same gentle allowing is the key to all true peace, a lesson we discover in our final story for this part of our journey. It is a tale of a king who sought a single sentence that could guide him through all of life's changes. This is the story of the king and the ring. A great king summoned all the wise men of his kingdom. "I wish for you to create for me a single beautiful ring," he said. "And on this ring you must engrave a short sentence. But it must be a sentence that has a very special quality. It must be a sentence that when I am in my moments of deepest despair and sorrow will bring me hope. And when I am in my moments of greatest triumph and joy, it will remind me to be humble. It must be a sentence that is true in all times and in all situations." The wise men went away, and they deliberated for many weeks. They were scholars and philosophers, and they came up with long, complex, and profound sentences. But none of them seemed to have the simple, universal power that the king had asked for. Finally, an old, humble Zen master, who was a servant at the court, came to the king. He handed him a simple, unadorned golden ring. The king looked at it. Engraved in tiny, simple letters were 4 small words: "This too shall pass." The king read the words, and he understood. He had found his teaching. When his kingdom was threatened and his heart was full of fear, he would look at the ring and remember, "This too shall pass," and he would find the strength to endure. And when he had won a great victory and his heart was full of pride and arrogance, he would look at the ring and remember, "This too shall pass," and he would find a sense of humility and grace. This ancient story, found in many traditions, is perhaps one of the most essential of all teachings. It is a direct pointer to the truth of impermanence. Nothing, no matter how wonderful or how terrible, is permanent. The pleasant experiences will fade, the painful experiences will fade. This is not a pessimistic teaching. It is a deeply realistic and liberating one. When we are in pain, these 4 words are a great comfort. They remind us that our suffering is not a permanent state, and when we are happy, they are a wise reminder to savor the moment without clinging to it and to maintain a sense of balance and perspective. The story invites us to hold these 4 simple words in our own heart, a secret ring that we can turn to in any and all of the changing circumstances of our lives. A constant and gentle reminder of the great, flowing, and ever-changing river of reality. That simple, profound reminder, "This too shall pass," is a key that can unlock the prison of both our sorrows and our triumphs. This same wisdom which finds balance in the face of life's constant changes can also teach us about the very nature of our own mind. This brings us to a quiet story about a student who learned that the greatest truth is not a thing to be found, but a presence to be realized. This is the tale of the empty teacup. A young, brilliant scholar came to a Zen master, seeking the final truth. He had read every book and mastered every philosophy. He sat before the master, ready to display his vast knowledge. The master, a simple and quiet woman named Kiko, offered him tea. She took a small, empty teacup and began to pour. She filled the cup to the brim, but she did not stop. The hot tea overflowed, spilling onto the saucer and then onto the mat. "Stop," the scholar cried out. "The cup is already full. It cannot hold any more." Master Kiko calmly set down the teapot. "You," she said softly, "are like this teacup. You have come to me so full of your own ideas, your opinions, and your certainties that there is no room to receive anything new. If you wish to taste my tea, you must first empty your cup." This famous Zen story is a teaching on the state of mind required for any true learning or spiritual insight. We are often like the scholar, our minds so full of what we already know that we are not truly open. We listen to others not to understand, but to find flaws in their arguments or to wait for our turn to speak. We approach new experiences with our minds already made up. This state of a full cup makes true discovery impossible. The master's lesson is a radical invitation to cultivate what is called beginner's mind. A beginner's mind is empty, open, and full of curiosity. It is not weighed down by the arrogance of knowing. It is the practice of gently setting aside our own opinions and beliefs so that we can meet the present moment with a fresh and receptive heart. As you rest here, can you feel what it is like to gently set down your own full cup, to release, just for this moment, all that you think you know and to simply be here, open and ready to receive the simple, quiet truth of this moment. This same simple truth is often missed when we are too busy judging our own progress. This brings us to a story about two monks who learned a profound lesson about the nature of the path itself. This is the tale of the two monks and the long road. Two monks were on a pilgrimage to a sacred mountain. One monk, named Kenji, was very ambitious and competitive. He saw the pilgrimage as a race, and he was determined to get to the top first to prove his spiritual superiority. He walked as fast as he could, his eyes fixed on the distant peak, ignoring the world around him. The other monk, named Toshi, walked at a slow and gentle pace. He would often stop to look at a beautiful wildflower, to listen to the song of a bird, or to share a kind word with a fellow traveller. Kenji would look back and scoff at his friend's slow progress. Kenji, through his great effort, did indeed reach the top of the mountain first. He stood there, panting and exhausted, his heart full of pride. He looked out at the magnificent view, but he felt a strange sense of emptiness. He had arrived, but he had missed the entire journey. A few hours later, Toshi arrived at the summit. His face was not tired but radiant with a quiet joy. He had not been in a race. He had simply been walking. "Brother," Kenji said, a new humility in his voice. "You are so slow, yet you seem to have found more peace than I have." Toshi smiled. "You were so busy trying to conquer the mountain," he said, "that you forgot to let the mountain be your friend. The goal was not to get to the top. The goal was to be fully present for every single step of the walk." This story is a simple but profound teaching on the difference between goal-oriented living and process-oriented living. We are often like Kenji, our lives a series of goals to be achieved. We believe that our happiness lies at the summit, the promotion, the new house, the end of the project. We rush through our present moments, treating them as mere obstacles to be overcome on the way to our future happiness. Toshi embodies the wisdom of the path. He knows that life is not a destination, it is a journey. The true richness of our lives is found not in the arrival, but in the quality of attention and heart we bring to each step along the way. The story is a gentle invitation to slow down, to look around, and to discover the beauty that is right here on the path you are walking now. This same simple beauty is often found not in what we add to our lives, but in what we are willing to let go of. This brings us to a quiet story about a man who believed his strength was in his possessions, and the fire that taught him otherwise. This is the tale of the rich man's burning house. There was a very wealthy man who was deeply attached to his magnificent house and all the precious art and treasures within it. He spent his days in a state of constant anxiety, worrying about thieves, and his nights were troubled by dreams of his possessions being lost. His wealth was not a source of joy, but a heavy burden. One night a fire broke out, and the house was quickly engulfed in flames. The man stood outside, watching in horror as his entire world turned to smoke and ash. He was in a state of complete and utter despair. He had lost everything. A Zen master who lived nearby came and stood beside him in silence. After a long time, as the last flames died down, the master spoke. "My friend," he said, "you have been carrying a very heavy house on your back for many years. Now the fire has kindly lifted that burden from you. For the first time, you are free." The rich man looked at the master, and then at the smouldering ruins, and in the great empty space where his house had been, he saw the full moon, brilliant and clear in the night sky, a beauty he had never noticed before, because his own roof had always been in the way. He began to laugh, a laugh of profound and sudden liberation. He had not lost his treasure, he had only just found it. This story is a powerful Zen teaching on non-attachment. Our possessions, our roles, and even our own identities can become a kind of house that both shelters us and imprisons us. We become so identified with these external things that we live in constant fear of their loss. The fire, which seems like a catastrophe, is a metaphor for the inevitable changes and losses of life. The master's wisdom is to see this loss not as a tragedy, but as a potential liberation. It is an opportunity to discover a source of peace and security that is not dependent on anything external. The full moon represents our own pure, unobstructed awareness, our true nature. It is always there, but it is often obscured by the roof of our own attachments and worries. The story reminds us that our greatest freedom is found not in what we can accumulate, but in our ability to let go. This same ability to let go is the key to all true peace. A lesson we learn from a warrior who learned that the only battle worth winning is the one within. Nami Balademingdas brings us to a tale of a samurai who was given an impossible task. This is the story of the samurai and the 3 days of peace. A great and powerful samurai was plagued by a terrible, violent temper. It had won him many battles, but it had also cost him his family and his own inner peace. He went to a Zen master. "Master," he said, "I will give you all my wealth if you can cure me of my anger." The master replied, "I cannot cure you, but I will make a bargain with you. Go and live in a hut in the mountains for 3 days. If you can go for 3 full days without a single thought of anger, then you will be cured." The samurai was overjoyed. "Only 3 days. That is easy," he said. He went to the hut. The first day was wonderful. The birds sang, the sun shone, and he felt a peace he had never known. This is easy, he thought. On the second day, a farmer's stray goat wandered by and began to eat the thatch from his roof. The samurai felt a surge of irritation, but he remembered his vow, took a deep breath, and gently shooed the goat away. He was very proud of his self-control. On the morning of the 3rd day, he was sitting in meditation, already tasting his victory. He was just a few hours away from being cured. Just then, he heard a sound and opened his eyes. A small, grubby-looking boy from the village had wandered into his hut and was about to take a bite out of the samurai's last rice ball. In that instant, an uncontrollable rage, born of his frustrated desire and his wounded pride, exploded in the samurai's heart. He leaped to his feet, his hand on his sword, ready to strike the child, and in that moment he saw the truth. He had failed. He could not even control his own mind for 3 simple days. He returned to the master, his head bowed in shame. "I have failed," he said. "My anger is more powerful than I am." "No," the master said gently. "Today, for the first time, you have not failed. Today, you have finally met your true opponent. It is not the goat or the child. It is your own mind. The journey is not about never feeling anger. The journey is about learning to see it when it arises, with a clear and an honest heart. Your cure did not begin when you went to the hut. It has just begun now, in this moment of your honest failure." This story is a profound lesson on the nature of spiritual practice. We are often like the samurai, believing that the goal is to achieve a state of perfect, unbroken peace, to get rid of our anger or our anxiety forever. This is a goal that is doomed to failure, and it creates a constant sense of striving and self-judgment. The master's wisdom is to show that the real practice is not about achieving perfection, but about cultivating awareness. The cure is not the absence of anger, but the ability to be mindfully present for our anger when it arises, without being consumed by it and without judging ourselves for it. The samurai's moment of failure was his moment of greatest awakening, because it was the moment he finally saw the truth of his own mind clearly. The same clear seeing is what allows us to distinguish between what is essential and what is merely a distraction. This brings us to a quiet story about a student who was given a single simple task and the profound wisdom it contained. This is the tale of the student and the single grain of rice. A new student came to a monastery, eager to learn the deepest secrets of Zen. He was a man of great energy and ambition. He went to the master. "I am ready to work," he said. "Give me the most difficult task, the one that will lead me to enlightenment the fastest." The master nodded. He led the student to the monastery's vast storehouse where there were hundreds of large sacks of rice. The master took a single tiny white grain of rice from one of the sacks and placed it in the student's palm. "Your task is this," he said. "Take this single grain of rice and carry it to the top of the mountain behind the monastery. When you get there, place it on the great altar stone. That is all." The student was deeply insulted. This was a task for a child. It was a waste of his great potential. But he was bound to obey. He started up the path, his mind full of angry and resentful thoughts. He was so focused on the absurdity of his task that he barely noticed the beauty of the forest around him. He just wanted to get it over with. As he climbed, he had to be careful not to drop the tiny grain of rice. This forced him to slow down. He had to pay attention to his every footstep. He had to be mindful of his every movement. Slowly, without him even realizing it, his angry, racing mind began to quiet down. His world, which had been full of grand ambitions, contracted to the simple, profound reality of this one tiny, precious grain of rice in his hand. When he finally reached the summit, he was no longer the same man. He reverently placed the single grain of rice on the altar stone. He looked out at the world, and he saw it with a clarity and a peace he had never known. The master was waiting for him at the bottom of the mountain. "Did you learn anything?" he asked. "Yes, master," the student said, bowing low. "You have taught me that the path to the greatest truth is made of 1,000 small, simple, and mindful steps. This story is a beautiful teaching on the power of mindfulness in our daily lives. We are often like the student, waiting for the big task, the grand, important moment that will define our lives or our spiritual path. We can dismiss the small, ordinary moments as unimportant, but the Master's wisdom is to show that there are no unimportant moments. The entire path is contained in the quality of attention we bring to the smallest of our actions. The student's task was not to carry a grain of rice. His task was to learn how to be completely present. By giving him a task that was so simple and so small, the Master forced him to cultivate a profound state of mindfulness. The story is a gentle reminder that the peace we seek is not found at the top of some distant mountain. It is found right here, in the simple, mindful act of taking the next step. This same mindful presence is what allows us to hear the truth, even when it is silent. This brings us to a story about a king who demanded an answer, and a master who gave him a much greater gift. This is the tale of the king and the silent sage. A king who was a great and powerful ruler was also a man of deep philosophical curiosity. He summoned a Zen sage to his court. The sage was a woman who was known to have realized a truth that was beyond all words. "I have one question for you," the king declared. "What is the ultimate nature of reality? You must tell me the final truth." The sage did not speak. She simply stood before the king in a state of profound and radiant silence. The king waited. The minutes stretched on. The entire court held its breath. The silence in the room became so deep and so powerful that it felt like a living presence. The king grew impatient and then angry. "Why do you not answer me?" he demanded. "I am the king. You are commanded to speak." At that moment, the king's most trusted minister, who had been a secret student of this sage for many years, leaned over and whispered in the king's ear, "Your Majesty, the sage is answering you. The thunder of the Dharma is roaring in your ears. Are you not hearing it?" The king was stunned. He looked at the sage's deep, unwavering, and peaceful silence. And in that moment, he understood. The ultimate reality was not a concept that could be spoken or explained in words. It was this vast, living, and profound silence that was present right here, in this very room, underneath all the noise of his own demanding mind. The sage had not refused to answer him. She had given him the answer directly, not as an idea, but as a living experience. This story is a direct pointer to the nature of our own awareness. We are constantly searching for answers in the world of words and thoughts. We believe that if we can just find the right philosophy, the right explanation, we will find peace. But the sage's silent teaching shows that the truth we are seeking is not a thought. It is the silent, spacious awareness in which all thoughts are born and die. This awareness is always here. It is the background of our entire life. The practice of meditation is the practice of learning to become familiar with this inner silence. It is to learn to rest in the quiet space of our own being and to discover that in this silence all our questions are answered, not with words, but with a deep and unshakable peace. This same peace is the source of all true generosity, as our next story reveals. It is a tale of a man who gave away his most precious possession, only to find that he had received an even greater one. This is the story of the Master's last robe. The Zen master Raikan lived a life of profound simplicity and poverty. His most valuable possession was a single warm quilted robe that had been given to him by his own master, a robe that he treasured. One cold winter night, a thief broke into his small bare hut while Raikön was out. The thief searched everywhere, but there was nothing of value to steal. As he was about to leave, disappointed and angry, Raikön returned. He saw the thief, and he felt not anger, but a deep and overwhelming compassion. "You have come all this way on such a cold night," Raikön said. "You cannot leave with nothing. Please, take this as a gift." And he took off his own treasured warm robe and offered it to the thief. The thief, completely bewildered by this act of kindness, snatched the robe and ran off into the night. Raikön sat down in his now empty and very cold hut. He looked out the window at the brilliant winter moon, and as he sat there, shivering, he wrote one of his most famous poems, "The Thief Left It Behind, the Moon at My Window." This story is one of the most beloved in Zen, for it reveals the heart of an enlightened being. Raikön's poverty was not a lack, it was a profound freedom. He was so unattached to his own possessions, even his most treasured one, that he could give it away without a second thought, as a simple act of compassion. But the deepest teaching is in his final reflection. He does not feel loss. He does not feel that he has been robbed. Instead, he sees what he still has, the simple, profound, and priceless beauty of the moon. His heart is so full of this inner richness that the loss of his outer warmth is of little consequence. He even feels a gentle pity for the thief, who was able to take the robe, but who had to leave the far greater treasure of the moon behind. The story is a gentle question to all of us. What are our true treasures? Are they the outer robes that can be taken from us? Or are they the inner moon of our own peaceful, appreciative awareness, a treasure that no one can ever take away? This same appreciative awareness is the key to all true beauty, a lesson we learn from a master who found perfection not in what was there, but in what was not. This brings us to a tale from the world of Japanese art, the story of the missing flower. A great lord commissioned a famous Zen master, who was also a master of flower arrangement, to create an arrangement for the most important room in his castle. The master was given access to the lord's magnificent gardens, which contained thousands of the most beautiful and perfect flowers. The lord waited with great anticipation. When the master was finally ready, he was led into the great room. He looked at the alcove where the arrangement was to be, and he saw a single, simple, dark bronze vase, and in the vase there was nothing. It was empty. The lord was furious. "I have given you the most beautiful flowers in the land," he roared, "and you mock me with an empty vase. This is an insult." "Please, your lordship," the master said calmly. "Look again." The lord, still angry, looked again at the empty vase. And because he was looking so intently, he began to see things he had not seen before. He saw the beautiful, subtle, and perfect form of the vase itself, which was usually obscured by the flowers. He saw the way the light played on its dark surface, and as he looked at the empty space within the vase, his own mind began to imagine the most perfect flower that could possibly exist. A flower more beautiful than any real flower in his garden. The empty space was not empty. It was full of potential, full of a beauty that was born in his own mind. "I see," the Lord whispered, humbled. "The most perfect flower is the one that is not there." This story is a profound teaching on the Zen aesthetic of emptiness and simplicity. We live in a world that is constantly trying to fill every space with noise, with things, with information. We are often uncomfortable with emptiness, but the Master's arrangement shows that emptiness is not a lack. It is a space of pure potential. It is what allows beauty to arise. In art, the empty space around the object is as important as the object itself. In music, the silence between the notes is what gives the music its meaning. And in our own lives, it is in the moments of quiet, of stillness, of emptiness, that our own creativity, our own wisdom, and our own peace can finally have the space to emerge. This same wisdom which finds fullness in emptiness is at the heart of our next story. It is a tale of a student who was given a single, seemingly impossible task, and the profound freedom he found in it. This is the story of the unfillable hole. A young student came to a Zen master. "Dalwa says of thindo bin sedum bowl hole." Avalokiteshvara, he was a man of great energy, and he was determined to find the source of his own restless desires. Master, he said, my heart feels like a great empty hole that I am always trying to fill with success, with pleasure, with knowledge. But no matter how much I put into it, it is never full. Please tell me, how can I fill this hole? The master led the student to the monastery's garden. He pointed to a small dark hole in the ground that was the entrance to a badger's den. Your task is this, he said. You must fill this hole completely. The student was pleased. This was a practical, concrete task. He got a shovel and began to pour dirt into the hole. He poured and poured, but the hole seemed to be bottomless. He worked all day, and by evening he had created a great mound of earth over the hole, but he could feel that the hole itself was still empty beneath. He tried pouring water into it, but the water just disappeared into the earth. He tried stuffing it with rocks, but they too vanished into the darkness. He worked for 3 days, becoming more and more exhausted and frustrated. Finally he gave up. He lay on the ground, his body aching, and he peered into the dark, empty hole. And as he lay there, in a state of complete surrender, a new thought arose. What if, he thought, the point is not to fill the hole? What if the point is to learn to be at peace with the emptiness? In that moment, he felt a profound sense of release. He stopped fighting. He simply lay there, and he let the empty hole be empty. And he realized that this emptiness was not a terrifying void. It was a space of quiet, of potential, of peace. He returned to the master. I could not fill the hole, he said. Good, the master replied. The hole in your heart is not a flaw. It is not a mistake. It is the very space that allows you to be alive, to be open to the world, to feel love, to experience joy. Stop trying to fill it, and you will discover that it is not an emptiness to be feared, but a sacred spaciousness to be cherished. That sacred spaciousness within, the unfillable hole that is not a lack but our greatest freedom, is a truth we often discover only when we are willing to let go of our own strength. This brings us to a story about a man who believed his power lay in his fists, and the gentle lesson that taught him otherwise. This is the tale of the strongest man in the village. In a small village lived a man of immense physical strength. He could lift great stones and bend iron bars with his bare hands. He was very proud of his power, and he would often boast, I am the strongest man in the village. No one can defeat me. He saw the world as a place of conflict, where the strong always prevailed. A travelling Zen monk, who was old and frail, came to stay in the village. The strong man, hearing of the monk's reputation for wisdom, decided to challenge him. He went to the small temple where the monk was staying. Old man, he boomed, they say you are wise, but wisdom is useless against true strength. I can break you with one hand. The monk looked up from his tea, his face calm and untroubled. You are indeed very strong, he said. Your strength is like that of a great stone wall. It is very impressive. But may I ask, have you ever known the strength of water? The strength of water, the man scoffed. Water is weak, it has no shape. It can be held in a cup. Let us see, the monk said. He led the man to a great waterfall that descended down a cliff of solid granite. For 1,000 years, the monk said, this weak water has been flowing over this strong rock, and which one is winning? The man looked and saw that the water, through its relentless softness and persistence, had carved a deep, smooth channel through the heart of the solid stone. He saw that the rock, for all its hardness, had been shaped and yielded to the water's gentle, constant flow. Your strength is the strength of a moment, the monk said. It is the strength that resists. But there is a greater strength, the strength that yields, that adapts, and that endures. The stone fights, and so it is worn away. The water flows, and so it is eternal. In that moment, the strongest man in the village felt his own rigid, brittle strength melt away, and for the first time he bowed his head, not in defeat, but in true understanding. This story is a beautiful Taoist and Zen teaching on the two kinds of power. The strong man represents the power of the ego, the hard power that seeks to dominate and control. This kind of power is impressive. but it is always in a state of conflict and is ultimately brittle. The water represents the power of the spirit, the soft power of yielding, patience, and gentle persistence. This is the power that does not fight, but flows around obstacles. It is the power of a compassionate heart, which can over time wear away even the hardest of defenses. The story is a gentle invitation to look at the struggles in our own lives. Where are we trying to be the rock, using force and resistance? And where could we learn to be more like the water, finding our strength in softness, flexibility, and a deep and patient trust in the flow of life? This same patient trust is what allows us to see the world not as a series of problems to be solved, but as a garden to be tended with a loving heart. This brings us to a quiet story about a monk who learned that the greatest miracles are often the most simple. This is the tale of the monk who made the flowers grow. A Zen monastery was famous for its magnificent and rare peonies. Monks and pilgrims would travel for hundreds of miles to see them bloom. The care of these peonies was entrusted to the monastery's head gardener, a silent old monk who seemed to have a magical touch. A young, ambitious novice who wanted to learn the gardener's secrets followed him for a whole season. He watched the old monk's every move, but he was disappointed. The old monk did not seem to do anything special. He did not use secret fertilizers or perform magical chants. He simply weeded the garden, watered the plants when the soil was dry, and occasionally he would just stand among the flowers for a long time in complete silence, as if he were listening to them. At the end of the season, the novice, frustrated, went to the old gardener. "Master," he said, "I have watched you all season and I have learned nothing. You do nothing special, yet your flowers are the most beautiful in the land. What is your secret?" The old gardener looked at the young novice with his clear, calm eyes. "You have been watching my hands," he said, "but you have not been watching my heart. The secret is not in what I do. The secret is that when I am with my flowers, I am not thinking about enlightenment or about the sutras or about what I will have for dinner. When I am with my flowers, there is only the flowers. I give them my whole undivided and loving attention, and the flowers, they feel this love, and so they bloom." This story is a simple but profound teaching on the power of pure, wholehearted presence. We are often like the novice, looking for a secret technique, a special trick, or a complicated method to achieve the results we want in our lives. We believe that success and beauty come from doing the right things. But the old gardener's wisdom is that the most powerful technique of all is simply to bring the full, loving quality of our presence to whatever we are doing. The flowers did not respond to his actions, they responded to his attention. This is a lesson for every aspect of our lives. When we are with our children, are we truly with them, or are we thinking about work? When we are listening to a friend, are we truly listening, or are we just waiting for our turn to speak? The story reminds us that the greatest gift we can give to the world, to others, and to ourselves is the simple, undivided, and loving gift of our own full attention. In that simple presence, all of life seems to bloom. This same simple, loving presence is the theme of our final story for tonight. It is a tale that brings us back to the most fundamental teaching of all, that the peace we seek is not a destination, but a way of walking. This is the story of the master's final journey. A great Zen master was very old, and he knew he was dying. His disciples gathered around him, their hearts full of sorrow. "Master," his senior disciple asked, his voice breaking, "you are leaving us. Please, give us one final teaching to guide us when you are gone. What is the most important lesson you have learned in your entire life?" The master, who was frail and weak, was silent for a long time. His disciples leaned in close, expecting some profound, final philosophical truth. Finally, the master slowly opened his eyes. He looked at the anxious, grieving faces of his students, and a look of deep, unconditional love filled his eyes. He slowly raised one thin hand, and he did not point to a sutra or to the sky or to his own heart. He simply pointed to his own 2 feet, resting at the end of his mat, and with his last quiet breath he whispered, "Walk as if your feet are kissing the earth." And in that one simple, beautiful instruction, the master gave the whole of the teaching. The entire journey, all the meditation, all the wisdom leads to this. the ability to live our ordinary life with a sacred and a loving attention. The stories have done their work for tonight. They have been quiet companions, pointing you back to the peace that is your own true nature. Let them go now, like leaves drifting on a quiet stream. There is nothing left to hold on to, nothing left to understand. Return your attention now to the most simple and sacred truth of all, the gentle, quiet feeling of your own breath. Feel it flow in and feel it flow out. This is the silent teaching, the anchor that holds you in the safe harbor of this present moment. Let each breath be a gentle kiss to your own life, a soft wave of relaxation carrying you deeper and deeper into a state of profound and healing rest. The journey is complete. You have arrived. There is nowhere else to be and nothing else to do but to rest. Thank you for sharing this quiet time. Sleep well.